It is 2:22, and we're going to go ahead and open today's regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. It's Tuesday, February 28th. And now I'd like to welcome Clerk Rodriguez to do roll call.
Thank you, Madam President. Trustee Woodley.
Here.
Trustee Westlake.
Here.
President Smith.
Here.
I'm here. Vice President Nicolette.
Here.
Trustee Mayberry.
Here.
Trustee Church.
Here.
And speaking of JJ, I believe our student representative is going to be zooming in here momentarily. So
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We will welcome her as soon as she joins. We'll pause and we'll welcome her. Okay, moving on to,
She's here. I'm here.
hello, Ivy, Miss Betmall. Thank you for joining. We see you. We'll also look for your hand today, so anytime you want to jump in, we'll pay close attention to that. All right, for our Pledge of Allegiance, some of our team members do work in the background that we don't see or don't realize that we see. So for today's pledge, I would like Michelle Anderson to please lead us in the pledge.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before everyone sits, if you could remain standing, we'd like to take a moment of silence. Our community is dealing with an unimaginable loss of 5 people with the Carefly crash, and so we would like to have a moment of silence in recognition of that. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. So thank you. So that goes ahead, and we're going to close Section 1, our opening items, and we're going to move on to Section 2, our consent agenda items. So there are some items that have already been requested by one or multiple of our trustee colleagues. So the items that I am aware of is item 2.03 will be pulled. And then items 2.18 and 2.19 will be pulled together. So while we will discuss 2.18 and 2.19 together, we will still have separate votes related to them, which still allows each trustee to vote for one, both, or none, potentially. But we will have those conversations together. So that opens up
one comment. Mm-hmm. I sent it out. I know I sent it at the last minute. 2.03. I don't think we're following policy. I think that needs to be removed completely until a future agenda item.
Well, we would discuss that here and possibly vote to have it sent back.
Okay.
So that's the whole, that's the whole point with pulling it. So I do want to call for any other items outside of 2.03, 2.18, and 2.19. I don't know of any other items. All right, seeing no other items, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to address the items that are going to be for open discussion, and then we will also call for public comment on those items. And that would be item 2.02, 2.04 through 2.17, and then 2.20 to 2.22. So is there any discussion on those items before we go to public comment? No? JJ, do we have public comment on any of those items? All right, seeing no, I will look for a motion to approve those agenda items.
Move to approve, Madam President.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Trustee Mayberry, seconded by Clerk Rodriguez. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carries 7-0. Now we'll go ahead and we will pull item 2.03. This is the approval of the following appointment to the Council on Family Resources Centers for a 2-year term ending in June 30th, 2024. This is an item now for individual possible action, and so I'd like to invite up Dr. Paul Lamarca, our Chief Strategies Officer. Hi and welcome.
Thank you. My name is Rochelle Murray. I'm the director of the intervention department, and I am the staff liaison for this particular committee.
Thank you. All right, Trustee Church, feel free to move forward with your questions.
Sure. Basically, what this is the automatic appointment of what was called an applicant to this committee. Never, as I understand it, was put out to bid, so to speak, for the community to apply. Dr. LaMarca, can you maybe explain that? And the email that we had, and again, I'm pulling this up kind of quickly, we received an application from a current applicant. I am so confused, because how do you get an application when it's never been put out for application?
Sure, thank you for the questions. My understanding of the situation is the opening was posted for 2 months, a little bit longer. It was open to the public. It was advertised in, I think, more than one way. Ms. Murillo can comment on that. We received only one applicant for the position. The applicant was interviewed by a committee. He met the qualifications, and the committee selected him.
So just to clarify, because your statement alleged that this was not brought to the public. It sounds like it was. Can you state, Dr. LaMarca, it was posted publicly? Or yes,
Yeah, we
thank
do
you.
get support through board service, so it was posted, and it's been vacant approximately 2 to 3 months. And we had not received any applicants before the applicant that applied to the position.
Okay. Yeah. The way this was worded, I was not aware of that. So if that's the way it was, that's the way it was, and everything's hunky-dory. I would maybe ask that, show me that was published at some future time, just so I can see where that was, because I obviously missed it. Thank you.
I might be able to help with that. So the board committees constantly list which ones are open, and so anyone in the public, this is a good opportunity. We love people on our committees, so feel free to go to Washoe Schools and go to the trustees area. You'll see the board committees, and then they're all listed there.
Exactly. I missed it. I mean, I go there all the time, and mea culpa. If it was there, then I'm wrong, and I apologize.
Great. Well, that's a happy ending. All right. Is there any public comment on this item, JJ? All right. If not, I'll be looking for a motion to approve item 2.03. On 2.03? Sure, sure.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't fill out a Okay. Renee Rosentis. So if it's that difficult to find the advertisements of these spots that need to be filled, can we put flyers out here for the meeting so that the parents can see them? Can we put them in other places besides that one spot that no one seems to have seen?
So in public comment, we don't actually respond, but we
yeah.
listen, and
Okay, I'm
it
just
has been heard.
I'm suggesting. Okay, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll get that card from you. All right, so I'm looking for a motion to approve item 2.03.
So moved.
Moved by Clerk Rodriguez, seconded by Trustee Woodley. Is there any discussion on the item? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, motion carries 7-0. Now we're going to move on to items 2.18 and 2.19. Again, we're going to be opening these together so that we can have a joint conversation. We will have separate motions on this. Okay, so when we get to that point, or if any one of our colleagues is interested in making a motion, just know we will be making separate a motion to approve or to not for either of those items. So for those items, I would like to welcome our Superintendent, Dr. Susan Enfield, to provide some comment, and then we will open this up because I know that there are several questions about these two items.
Thank you, President Smith. And again, my apologies for not being there in person. I know my reputation as a snow wimp is quite well known, and it is not my wimpiness in dealing with the snow. My flight was canceled. It's out of town, so otherwise I would be there. So I appreciate your patience in having me join via Zoom. So I'll address, President Smith, would it make sense to take 2.18 first, have question and discussion, and then 2.19 second for separate discussion?
You know, we're opening them together, so feel free if you'd like to open it up to us and to talk about both of them, and then we can ask individual questions on both. But I feel that they're closely related enough where we can have a single conversation around them.
Understood. Thank you. So I'll try to be very concise so that we can open it up for questions from trustees. And I want to be clear that I understand that there are a lot of unknowns with our budget. I also understand the very legitimate questions that people have around how we make sure we're providing adequate in-school support while also making sure that we have adequate central office support for those schools. And that's a constant balancing act that we as district leaders make. And I'm bringing these three positions forward because I do think they are very important. And I'll describe 2.18 first. So I know there was some confusion around the title of Associate Chief. Chief Academic Officer Dr. Parks is helping us, and I know we've spoken to you about this in the past, sort of re-envision our area superintendent role to really focus more intensively on supporting our principals to making sure that we have great teaching and learning happening in our schools. And so part of that sort of migration was to come up with a different title, but it is the same position. So I want to make that clear first. I then want to say that this is work that I've been engaged in for a very, very long time, and following the research out of the University of Washington and the Wallace Foundation and many others around what effective principal supervision and support looks like. And our current area superintendents simply have a span of control that prevents them from, I believe, providing our principals with the very targeted supports they need in order to do their job most effectively. So right now, our area superintendents, future associate chiefs, oversee roughly 20, give or take, schools. Adding these two positions would bring that down to 15. And while the sort of the Cadillac model, if you will, is 8 to 10 principals per area supervisor, I don't believe we can get to that right now, but 15 would be more manageable. In addition, we're looking at reevaluating that role so that those individuals are actually spending more of their time in schools with principals and staff to really support the work that's happening there. And why this is so important is because when I talk with students, when I talk with staff, when I talk with trustees, when I talk with families and community members at large, there are a few, but there's one very, very clear, consistent theme. And that is the lack of consistency in practice and implementation of programs across our schools. And that is something that we have to address. We need to make sure that our students, staff, and families have the very fair expectation that we are functioning as a high-performing system and that we've got consistent practices across our schools. Let me be clear, not cookie cutter. This isn't saying that every school is doing the same thing on the same day, but it does mean, for example, that when we have to transition to distance learning as we have today, that there are certain expectations that all families and students and staff can have around what that means. And having these associate chiefs will help ensure that consistency. And I'll stop there and take questions.
I see one question from Trustee Church.
Yeah, basically, today earlier at the budget meeting, we discussed there's a budget analysis going on of, for lack of a better word, non-direct educational support staff who all provide very important roles, but the size of that seems to be increasing versus the size of filling the teacher, an assistant teacher or teacher and or staff assistants directly to the teachers. We're seeing decreasing enrollment, but increasing staff. The cost of this, I just learned about an hour ago, if I read right, was over $600,000 a year. So correct me if I'm wrong on that. And the fact that I just got the material.
Trustee Church, since you asked to be corrected, the item for are we talking about the associate chiefs, or are we talking about the chief of staff?
The combined total for two.
Okay.
The combined total for two is that, but I want to make sure that
Yes.
the community knows that that's for the 3 people, and then it's also for their benefits and their PERS.
Correct.
So it's not necessarily their salary, just like how we look at teachers and
Correct.
people get the warped idea that they're bringing home more money than they are, because these are also benefits and PERS costs. So I want to state that for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think I said cost. So the cost is for 3, over $600,000 per year. That's a lot of teachers that we could have, et cetera. While I think the positions may be valid, we've got the analysis in progress, we've got the legislature in progress, and nobody's come forward to say what we're going to cut for lack of a better word, the bureaucracy. So I'm just putting on the record, unless somebody changes my mind, I'm going to be a no, because I think it's putting the cart before the horse before we know what the legislature is going to give us.
President Smith, may I respond?
Absolutely, Superintendent.
Trustee Church, thank you for pointing that out. One thing that I will add to that is that one of my first acts as your superintendent this summer was to return 57 teachers on special assignment back into the schools. And make no mistake, as I've said before, while their title was teachers on special assignment, they were working in central office leadership roles and providing professional development and other Trustee Church, as you pointed out, essential services. But we knew that facing the teacher shortfall we had, that we needed to return them to the classroom. In evaluating what the real essential services that we lost in doing that we realized that we needed to, and this was in consultation with school staff, with district staff, we decided to bring back 12 of those 57. That means that 45 former central office positions are currently now back in schools, and that the cost savings there, and I know Mark Mathers is wincing right now as I say savings, I'm going to qualify that in a second, was $4.1 million, which we used to offset the fiscal hit that we took because of our declining enrollment. So I just think it's important to paint the whole picture that we have returned 45 central office positions to the classroom, to our schools.
Thank you, Superintendent. I see Trustee Westlake's light on, and then Clerk Rodriguez to follow.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Superintendent Enfield. I just want to clarify something before I make my comment, because sometimes things get lost in the weeds when I say things and it's misunderstood. I first want to say I trust Dr. Enfield's research on this and what she is saying to be true, but it is not my intent to make any principal or area superintendent work harder than they have to. However, we are in the middle of a strategic planning right now. We don't have all the facts regarding the budget. And to be honest, we have been asking our teachers to work exceptionally hard and go above and beyond their limitations, really, and our children are suffering. I'm not saying that this does not have to happen. I just don't think it should happen now until we address the fact that we do not have enough teachers. That should be on the absolute forefront, shaking the bushes, shaking the trees, trying to find qualified teachers and making ourselves look attractive as possible. Right now, in one of my schools, there isn't a teacher for a third grade class. Our principal and her assistant and other teachers are covering that class. That's not to say that they aren't extremely qualified, and I commend them, but that's not how it should be. At one of my middle schools, no speech teacher. And speech can affect someone's ability later on to be successful. And these are things that we should be offering before we even think about doing something else. No sixth grade special ed social studies teacher. I've already, just this week, I was told by 2 teachers they're going to be quitting. They are breaking, and before we do anything else, we have got to address that. Without teachers in front of our children, in my heart, I do not see us addressing and fixing violence, absenteeism, the emotional stability of our children. It is imperative that we have a teacher in front of our students engaging them. So I would just, to sum it up, I know I've drug on, this is where I get in the weeds. I'm not saying we don't need this. The importance of teachers is of such a greater importance right now. Thank you.
President Smith, should I respond?
Go ahead.
Trustee Westlake, you are absolutely right, and I will return to my decision to return 57 teachers on special assignment to the classroom at the start of the year, and the other steps that we are taking to recruit and retain our teachers. Mr. Mathers referenced the fact that we are working to begin providing benefits day one rather than having the 90-day waiting period. We worked closely with WEA at the start of the year to provide teachers with additional planning time by taking some of the professional learning community time that they had twice each month and giving that back to them for planning. We do believe that our strategic planning process will come up with a plan that will be compelling to attract not just teachers, but staff across the board to come and work in this wonderful district. So yes, we are doing a lot on the recruitment and the retention front. And at the same time, my job is to build systems within a larger system that will continue to help people do their jobs and ultimately improve outcomes for students. And I also want to be clear, Trustee Westlake, I neglected to say this before, why I'm bringing these forward now versus waiting. And there's a couple of things. You are very right to point out that we are in the early stages of our strategic planning process. However, whatever that plan ends up being that the board adopts, it will not negate the need, I believe, for these positions, and posting them now, even though they wouldn't start until the summer, posting them now allows us to cast as wide a net for the highest quality people, because this is when the hiring season in public education across the country really gets underway. So people start looking. In addition, these are positions that current principals may be interested in. And if the best qualified person for one of these roles ended up being a principal, we would need to then replace that person in our schools. And obviously we would want to do that in as timely a fashion as possible. So I just wanted to give that caveat around why the timing is now for this, even though I understand it's less than ideal from your perspective, which I completely see. But I also want to say that I share with you our need to recruit and retain and support our teachers as best we can. And there's work to do there, and we are doing that.
Thank you, Superintendent. And so this is a very good discussion, and it's very much worthy to have. I will say that the area superintendents, the associate chiefs, really do support teachers as well. So the way that the hierarchy works, and I know we know this, but just to kind of put it out there, principals go up to their next level, which are these associate chiefs, and that's who they bring in to support families that have additional needs, students. And right now, when we have a ratio that's over 20-1, it makes it difficult to provide an actionable service to these families and to these services when they need someone to be, or when the principal also needs someone to be involved, or the teacher. These 100% have my attention, but I do want to point out that these additional roles for these two associate chiefs really do provide services to the families and allow a more actionable way of getting back to them, because it's really, really difficult based on the certain ratio of more than 20-1 for schools for the associate chiefs to being able to support those principals and all of those families. That's just as a point of clarification so that everyone understands the way that that works up. When the principals need to go above themselves and need to bring in somebody from a higher level to provide that support. But I see Clerk Rodriguez, and then I see Vice President Nicolette after that. And after we answer some questions, we'll go to public comment on these two items.
Thank you, Madam President. I did speak with Dr. Rainfield a while ago talking about this because I know this was something that was going to be coming up. And, excuse me, I sympathize. I know, having served in Afghanistan, Haiti, working in law enforcement, I know the span of control can be really hard, especially in stressful situations. And I'm sure some of my colleagues here serving in the military, ideally, you don't want to supervise more than 6 people because you start to lose that span of control. And I know right now that I don't, I'll put this out there for Dr. Rainfield. She's having 8 to 10 people coming to her every day, and I know that can be distraction. So I definitely support this, and having visited our schools, having gone to them, this is something I hear from staff and principals alike, is like they have new principals and they don't feel like they have that support because area supes are so stretched out right now, and you got new area superintendents. So hearing this from staff in the schools stating that, they see this, they can support it, because that's something I don't want to do. We have too much leadership. Looking at an org chart, I say we don't. We got to maintain that consistency. And we have right now our superintendent that's asking us for help. I think we should really hear that, so I'm, kind of going off with Trustee Westlake. She's sitting here asking for help to maintain that consistency, which is something I know we've all discussed. We want consistency from incline to Gerlach, so I do support this. I feel for her. Having been, being a deputy administrator right now in my day-to-day job, it can be stressful. So I do support this, and Dr. Enfield, I do hear you.
Thank you, Clerk Rodriguez. Vice President Nicolette, and then after Vice President Nicolette goes Superintendent Enfield, I'm going to let you address the Chief of Staff position, and then we'll go ahead and take public comment.
Thank you. And I can lump this into 218 and 219 because they really do bleed into each other from a need standpoint, from a financial responsibility standpoint, and from a what difference will it make standpoint. There is no doubt in my mind that our area superintendents, we need to increase their presence. We need to increase the support to our schools. There is also no doubt in my mind that I would like to praise Superintendent Enfield coming on board initially and not trying to immediately onboard, let's call it Chief of Staff. She wanted to give it a try. She wanted to save the money. I commend her on that. Having said that, I cannot support this at this time. There are too many things that are before us, too many unknowns. I always think about sustainability. I always think about what else could we do that could make the improvements that these are trying to make. I get the intentionality. We just gave the financial office budget of 4 charges to do an analysis into walk zones, police officer expansion. Those are 2 safety issues. Those are always paramount. I suggest that you read a 2022 from Hunt Institute, the 4 things that parents and voters and families want for our schools. Safety was number 1. Second thing is academic support in this article. And our third charge was looking into the quality, the quantity, the cost of learning facilitators. And then finally, we gave a charge for no standalone principals to see how much that will cost. I hear time and time again from our standalone principals, and not in a complaint framework, but in a how much more I could do if I wasn't a standalone principal. And so at this time, until we go through strategic planning, and until we go through giving this deep dive into our next 2 years of funding, once the legislature has ended, then I will feel more comfortable looking at this. I do not argue with the need at all. The timing is not right, and so I can't support it.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette. So I see other lights. I'm going to let the superintendent talk about the chief of staff position, and then I'm going to go ahead and take public comment, and then we'll come back to Trustee Westlake and Trustee Church, okay? Superintendent Enfield.
Thank you, President Smith, and thank you, Vice President Nicolette. As I said in my comments when I prefaced this, I understand the awkwardness of the timing and the very legitimate questions people are asking about why the timing now. I want to speak a little bit to the special assistant position, which is equal to or similar to a chief of staff position, which in the past the district has had. And as Vice President Nicolette pointed out, when it was suggested to me when I first came on board that I hire for that, I said I don't know that I need that yet. I want to get the lay of the land. And I've now, going into my 8th month, gotten a good sense of the lay of the land. And we are simply not providing the level of service that our students, our families, our staff, and our community expect and deserve. As you've heard me say, we are not a system or a collection of schools and departments. And we need to strengthen our collaboration muscle, our ability to work quickly, nimbly, and strategically to meet the needs that we see in our schools, and that simply is not in place right now across our system. I believe strongly that one of the most important things we do as leaders is acknowledge that we can't do this work alone. Perhaps equally important, if not more important, is acknowledging when we need help. And I believe that our leadership team needs the help of this special assistant to make sure that we are clear and consistent and tight in our communication, in our implementation of practices, in follow through on expectations. When we say that we are going to go into distance learning, that we follow through on that with consistency and quality that our students need and deserve. And so I do not believe that this position will be a forever position. I believe that we will, in the coming months, build the systems that we need to function in the way that will become closer to meeting my expectations, which right now we are not. And I also think that we want to, for lack of a better term, make sure that the way in which we are engaging with the community and with the public is clear, and again, that there's follow through. One of the things that I keep hearing and I keep seeing and experiencing myself is we just don't have good follow through. And again, timing wise, I completely recognize that this feels like awkward timing. There is so much in play right now, critical work and critical needs that we are addressing, that this is not a position I feel I can put off for another 5 to 6 months. We need this now so that we can clean up what we're doing as a leadership team and provide the quality of service and support that our students, staff, and families expect and deserve.
Thank you, Superintendent Enfield. Now we'll go ahead and take combined public comment. Any public comment that's either on 2.18 or 2.19.
I had a clarification.
Valerie Fianaka.
Hi, Ms. Fianaka.
Hi.
We all made it, snow and all. I have a autistic grandson who has no speech therapy or OT because of no personnel in his school. In his IEP report and on his report card, WCSD has put in writing the fact that they cannot mainstream him at all, not for 1 hour at any point in the week, because they don't have staff to accompany him to an age-appropriate class. In his special ed class, they are working on days of the week and months of the year. This is a child who on his own has learned, literally on his own, every country in the world, the capitals of every country, and the flags that belong to those countries. He can do it on a blank map with no color, only the outlines of those countries. He can tell you every star in our solar system, but he can't read and he can't write. And our school district has put it in writing that they don't have staff to teach him how to read and write or how to mainstream him into his age-appropriate class. I'm telling you that's wrong. You are not meeting your fiduciary responsibilities to teach this child. You're babysitting him, and that's not right. He's obviously got gifts and talents. Obviously. There's not a person in this room, I venture to say, who could do the same on a map that he can do. I can't. I can't. I know a teacher at Des Moines High School who teaches math. I've known her since she was born. She's been there since the school was built. She tells me that she has 9 supervisors. I don't think she's a liar. I believe she's telling me the truth. Kaylin, I don't believe that you should be satisfied with adding any more administrators to this school district. I don't understand. I'm sorry, I don't buy into this at all. I don't think it's right. Until we get our teaching staff on board to teach the least of our students, we should not add one single extra administrator to this school district.
Thank you, Ms. Fianaka.
Kaylin Evans.
Mr. Evans.
Perfect timing. For the record, my name is Kaylin Evans, and I'm the president of the Washoe Education Association. And first, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate the conversation that's going on, because traditionally, in my experience in this, the board has very much been a rubber stamp, and it's something that the superintendent or staff propose. We discuss it more for optics, and then it's passed forward. So genuinely appreciate the, I don't want to say pushback, but just the differing perspectives and how we go about this, because ultimately that's how we get to the best place, right? We don't need to all agree how to get there, but if we're all going in the same direction, we want to have a different perspective on how to get there, because that's how we're going to find the best path. Full transparency, if Dr. Enfield weren't in this position and you guys were coming to advocate for additional area superintendents or central office staff, the association would be adamantly against that notion. The reason that we're not is because, to me, these positions, well, 2 reasons. First off, I 100% trust the judgment of our superintendent. And if our superintendent is telling us that this is what she needs, then I'm going to trust in her, and she's given me no other reason to think otherwise. The other reason is, to me, this isn't just adding more of the same. She is working on how to change the dynamic and the role and the relationship of that position specifically. And the area superintendents are a position that we as an association interact with regularly. And so again, to me, this saying we're going to just add and continue doing what we've been doing, because behind the scenes, the discussions that we're having and the work that she's doing with those positions, she's changing their dynamic and what their role within the school district is in a way that we fully support as an association. Because the way that she views those positions are much more in line with how we believe those positions should be held, and more in line with how we believe we can effectively collaborate and move forward together. So with those reasons, I wanted to say I really appreciate Trustee Westlake and Trustee Church when we're talking about the need to staff our schools, and I know every trustee in here fully agrees with that, and those of you in the stands, we appreciate the support as educators, wholeheartedly, genuinely appreciate these things. But again, with that being said, we as an association trust in this direction and support this move. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Renee Resentes.
Hi again, Ms. Resentes. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good.
Good. You haven't seen me here very much. I was very involved when my kids were little in the late 80s and early 90s, and I was president at Reed High School. Anyway, I was very active. So I have a lot of things going through my head as I'm hearing you speak, and I apologize because I'm not caught up in all the verbiage that you probably have shared while putting these together. And, but, okay, so just for coming where I'm at, in 2.18, the extra support that you would like to have, I would really like to see something positive that has been done based on all of the hirings that you've done and all the money you've thrown out to all these programs before we throw a whole bunch of money out there again. In 2.19, well, you talked about effective change. I would love to see effective change, but I haven't seen any. And I don't believe that we have to hire a special assistant to help. You've had parent after parent after parent and professionals come before this board to talk to you about the issues, and you've got all that testimony to fall back on. You don't need to hire professionals to get new ideas or to hear about what needs to be improved. You've got it right here on record, and I don't feel that they should be discounted. It's there. It doesn't cost you anything, and then you can put together something that is going to be effective for our children, like discipline, like morals, like whatever needs to be done so that we can have safe schools where our children can learn again. So that's what I have to say, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's all I have for this item.
Wonderful. I will add as a point of clarification that these three roles are not consultants. So although we always get good ideas from all of our staff members, none of these roles are consultants whose sole purpose is to go out and look for ideas. We definitely get a lot of great ideas from our staff and from our families. So I know that Trustee Westlake had a point of clarification. So we've talked a bit about this. So let's start bringing it in. I have some thoughts too. I'm going to let Trustee Westlake and Trustee Church go. Let's try to not cover the same ground, and then we're going to start moving it towards some type of action. Okay. So Trustee Westlake, you had a point to clarify.
So my first question would be: it looks like it's $210,000 per area superintendent. Is that the entry level salary for an area superintendent? That was my first question. And then that was 2.18. On 2.19, it says 65,000, but then if you go to the explanation materials, it's 193,000 for the assistants. So the one says 65,000 in the item, in the agenda item, and then when you get to the explanation, now it's 193,000 for the assistant.
I'll let the superintendent answer that, but that might be the cost for benefits and PERS. No? Okay. Then I'll let the superintendent, sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Enfield.
No, I was actually, and I don't believe that Dr. Mason would have this, and I'm not sure if Mr. Mathers is still in the room to explain why the 65,000 was talked about the way it was. But the salary for the associate soups, those are consistent across the board for that role. So these would be in line with our current area soups, these new associate chief positions. And the salary for the special assistant, I believe, is posted at 135. That's base salary, not including benefits and PERS.
It says 65.
That's Mr. Mathers, our CFO, and then also there may be Katie DeLong who may offer some more information on that. This is a good point to clarify.
Yeah, just as clarification, for the associate chief, the total cost of 210 includes benefits. And so roughly 40% of the cost of that position would be our retirement cost, health insurance, and other benefits.
But so these are entry level, right?
These are consistent So if it's a position, if it's a principal that's hired into the position, right, they wouldn't be coming in at an entry-level spot. So we've estimated, and try to kind of address that possible scenario. So I wouldn't say they're entry-level necessarily, but that's where we budgeted them based on certain assumptions. In terms of the special assistant to the superintendent, the reason why the cost note in the staff report is less than the salary, the expected salary of $135,000 plus benefits, is because this is for a partial part of the year. So if the special assistant comes on board, in roughly a month, we're budgeting those costs for the remainder of fiscal year 23. The entire cost then of the position and benefits would be budgeted in 24.
Okay, but you're saying 135, but then it says 193. I've heard so many different figures thrown out. We've got 65, and it didn't really clarify that, because then in the explanation, I was looking for that this is prorated, because in the explanation it still says 2022-23, and it should have just probably said 2023. And I've heard 135 thrown out, but it says 193. And just on the area superintendents, I understand that we're trying to make it even, Steven, and flow like it has been, but these positions, these individuals, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be negative, but they have not proven themselves to be efficient or capable in that position yet, and we're starting them off right at where we have our other area superintendents. I would be a lot more comfortable with starting someone off at a more reasonable salary and let's see their track record and then rewarding them, instead of just assuming that they're going to be the same as. There's a learning curve here too. I'm just saying these numbers need to be cleared up.
Thank you, Trustee Westlake. I'm going to defer over to Mr. Mathers. I'm going to commit myself to a change, because I'm noticing these are really now associate chief positions. I myself have defaulted back to the legacy language of area superintendents, but to Mr. Evans's point, this is a very different position. It falls within a totally new office, so I'm going to encourage us all to use the associate chief terminology for that position, because it does reflect the change in the scope of that role. And with that said, I'll invite Mr. Mathers to clarify, or because I know you were talking about if a principal comes into it, they're already a certain level within their income, so they would most likely not take a pay cut. We need to turn some mics off. I know who's next. In order to bring them into this, which I think is the issue here. But Mr. Mathers, go ahead and jump in.
So for the associate chief, that is the issue. It would be rare for a person to take a promotion and greater duties and not receive some level of increase. And so we've tried to account for that fact when we've quantified the cost of associate chief. Just again to clarify on the special assistant, the salary is budgeted at 135. With benefits, it's 193. That's the annual all-in cost of the position. But because this position won't be actually brought on board until maybe beginning of April at the soonest, we've quantified the partial cost for the remainder of fiscal year 23. So April, May, and June. That's why the cost shown for fiscal year 23, the year we're in, is a fraction of the total annual cost.
Thank you, Mr. Mathers. All right, Trustee Church, and then it's going to be Trustee Mayberry, and then let's start circling back on this, because just to make sure we're moving forward.
Trying to move forward. So this came to our attention on Thursday at 9 a.m. when the agenda comes out, and I asked a number of questions regarding this, and the answer was, quote, additional information will be provided at the meeting, and that's what's provided here. That's just not acceptable. I'm not going to fall into this trap. I've heard nothing that tells me this has to move forward right away, and that's just not acceptable practice to have me vote on $600,000 without having had time to research it, reach out to my constituents. In the spirit of cooperation, as I'm sitting here, I'm thinking of a couple of options in my brain that maybe could sway my vote. One would be if we made it a temporary position for 1 year to be brought back. Number two would be if the superintendent would commit to cutting other positions, and I'll go into that in a minute. And number three would be, is there any ESSER funding for this? Number four would be to postpone this just for one more meeting so we can reach out and sleep on it. But for example, I looked at the Diversity and Equity Department. They showed 10 positions. I remember one of them was funded by ESSER.
Trustee Church, we can't actually consider cutting other departments in this agenda item. It's totally fair if you want to see that, but we can't make a recommendation on that.
Would it be outside the agenda item to just direct her to find positions to cut without being specific?
Not in a trade. We would have to decline this. We would have to vote no on this, and then the superintendent would have to go back and see if she's able to listen to this feedback and come back in another way. But we can't provide the direction that she would specifically cut another department in order to trade for a yes.
Okay. Well, in summary, again, a one-year contract, a one-year position might sway my vote, bring it back at a future date, showing us where the cuts are going to be made. Maybe there's ESSER funding, or just postpone it. But I just can't be muscled into making a quick decision without having the facts for me to research.
Thank you. It's definitely not my intention that anyone feel muscled. We had a very long conversation about this, and I want to absolutely emphasize that each one of us in our autonomous state as trustees will make an independent vote on this. And there's no pressure whatsoever on an individual basis.
Just to clarify my statement on muscle, that means I haven't had time to review all the material because it was given to us today rather than the normal business days ahead of time.
Understood. I see Trustee Mayberry.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Thank you, Madam President. In contrast to Trustee Tripp, I have all the materials that I need to make a decision. I fully support this. I think it's important to remember that this is a superintendent's organization to run, not ours. And I understand the comments and the concerns from my colleagues. I do, and I think a lot of them are valid. But I think time's of the essence. Change happens. The change does not happen quickly. And I can appreciate the superintendent's expertise and her years as a superintendent. I'm not an expert in running a school district. Dr. Enfield is, and she's provided me a very thoughtful, meticulous argument on why we should support this. I don't see any, and I certainly don't see the nexus of services being supplanted by this. So those are my comments. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, Vice President Nicolette, and then let's start getting to some action. Joe. Okay, thank you very much. Clerk Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President. I was actually ready to make a motion.
Let's go for it.
So I make a motion that the Board of Trustees approves consent agenda item 2.18. We got to do those separately, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Seconded by, motion made by Clerk Rodriguez, seconded by Trustee Mayberry. Is there any more discussion that we have not covered on item 2.18?
I just clarification on what we're voting on.
2.18. And I saw Vice President Nicolette's light on originally.
I will just say that I was going to make a motion too, and I was going to couch it in the superintendent bringing back the associate chiefs for discussion at our first June meeting, but that's a moot point right now.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette. All right, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on to this motion that we have not already covered?
I just wanted to add something, Madam President, if I may. I agree with the motion. I appreciate that. But I just want to clarify, just for the record, that we all support Dr. Enfield. We appreciate and we respect her ideology, her work ethic, her accountability, and the way she does business. I see her role as a CEO or a general, for those of us that have been served in the military, and her work ethic and her ideology is only as good as the individuals and the soldiers that she has under her to represent her ideology. So if she doesn't have that span of control under her to execute her orders, then it's going to fall through the cracks. So that's one of the reasons why I believe in supporting this motion, and I intend on voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Woodley. I appreciate that. All right, so we have a motion and a second.
No, sorry.
And so all those in favor of approving item 2.18, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
All right, so that motion passes 4-3. Now we'll move on. The other item that we have is item 2.19. Clerk Rodriguez, I see your light on again.
Yes, ma'am. I vote that we approve consent agenda item 2.19.
And is there a second?
So I'll second that one too.
Thank you. For an area of conversation, I know that Superintendent Enfield, did you want to add anything around the possible ESSER funding?
Yes, Trustee Church raised that, and I think that's a very good point. And so Dr. Keogh and I will certainly look into, and I think it's highly probable that we could use ESSER funding for at least the coming year. And so we will certainly look into that and bring that back to the trustees.
Thank you.
Could that be part of a friendly?
I think they're going to already do that. Yeah, I think that's already going to be done.
Then for the record, I won't be voting yes. I'll be voting no.
Okay. Trustee Woodley, did you? No? Okay. So we have a motion on the floor from Clerk Rodriguez. We have a second from Trustee Mayberry. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
So that's 4-3, and the motion passes. Thank you all very much for this thoughtful and rigorous conversation. This was very, very helpful, and I think that it really indicates the depth of the conversation that we will have, and we provided some really good feedback to the staff and to the superintendent. All right, seeing that, we will go ahead and close our consent agenda items and move on to Section 3. These are our items for presentation and discussion. And our first item is 3.01. This is the presentation and discussion on the progress and schedule for the district-wide facility modernization plan. This item is for information and discussion only, and we'd like to welcome Adam Searcy, our Chief Operating Officer, and then possibly virtually, not virtually, live and in person, Mr. Paul Mills, the Senior Vice President of Canon Design. Hi. Hello. Welcome.
Just a brief introduction. Thank you, President Smith. Adam Searcy, for the record, Chief Operating Officer. We've been before you multiple times providing updates, and today is no different. We've been listening and working hard, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Paul Mills with Canon Design to give the trustees an update. Thank you.
President Smith, Dr. Am I on?
I'll get you.
Thank you. President Smith, Dr. Enfield, trustees. It's great to be in front of you again, and the purpose today is to give you a brief report on our progress since we were last together in December, as well as share with you some exciting enhancements that we've built into the process, as well as an extended timeline and the reasons for that, as well as a forecast of the next steps. Since December, we've been busy working with your internal and external representatives that are serving on the district planning group and stakeholder advisory group, and we've developed a series of guiding principles. Fundamental among those is one in which any sort of substantive dramatic change to the fabric of the community and the structure of the school system in the form of any sort of school closures is accommodated with some sort of trade-up scenarios. We're not looking at deductive options where students would be put in a situation where they and families would go to a school that's in equal or worse conditions that's further away from where they are today. So any sort of opportunities are accompanied with a trade up as part of it. Also, in those occasions where there are options that are under consideration, that intentional and authentic engagement of affected families and communities and schools would be conducted as part of it. So we've been developing a series of facility options, and I'll just remind you of when we describe this process to you, the design of this process is such that communities have options in front of them, option A, B, C, D, the opportunity to learn, question, and to actually express through surveys the level of support or opposition to any particular options that are put in front of us. And our team has been working very diligently on designing various facilities options Many of them include opportunities for some of these trade-up opportunities that are part of it. I've described to you before some of the challenges associated with school size, with grade configurations, with geographical remoteness, et cetera, as part of it. And looking through this and designing all these scenarios, we've really taken cues from executive leadership on this, as well as stakeholders participating in the process, that we need to take a little bit longer time frame than the June completion of the project that was originally envisioned. We always had community forums and outreach programmed into this process. However, listening and reacting to it, we're being very responsive and adjusting this process in a way that includes a lot more authentic engagement with school communities as part of it. So when we're talking about trade-up scenarios, one of the ones that comes to the surface is one of the more dramatic is the notion of a consolidation. This would be where a program at a particular site would be located at a different site or perhaps split among others, and this consolidation would have a repurposing of a facility associated with it. Often called a school closure, which sounds very deductive. We are flipping the script, and this is about trade-up scenarios that I was describing earlier, with the benefits I've outlined here. First and foremost, about improving equity across the county. You have your newer parts of the county, you have your older parts of the county with smaller, older schools that are under-equipped, and by creating these trade-up opportunities, we would help close those equity gaps. Enhanced learning environments, clearly from refreshed facilities, expanding educational programs, as well as student support, staff development, et cetera, can be afforded through the operational efficiencies and cost savings that could be brought about from this. Now, clearly, there are challenges associated with making any sort of change like this. As human beings, we tend to be reluctant to change unless there is some sort of benefit associated with it. And clearly, schools are very personal and very emotional for many people. These institutions are woven into the fabric of neighborhoods, and we know that there's a lot of community and neighborhood attachment to specific programs at the buildings, and we want to make sure any sort of change to that is accompanied with a responsible level of engagement and conversation around it. Another challenge, there might be some cases where with newer and fewer schools that some of them might not be as walkable, and there might be more transportation required as part of it, and that's part of our analysis and figuring on all the trade-offs associated with different options. Also, timing of this, because this isn't just a let's make a decision, close a school, and tell families, instead of this old school that's near your house that's under-equipped and in poor shape, you're going further to another one that's perhaps even in worse conditions. We're talking about trade-ups, which requires dramatic timeline of designing and constructing a capital project, which, as you know, takes years to accomplish as part of it. Moreover, with your predictable WC1 funding, we know that a certain proportion could be put towards these type of projects on top of other investments in schools that are worthy of need or worthy of investment that aren't subject to any sort of trade-up scenarios, but we just need to renovate, that you could probably afford maybe one or two of these a year, and it's starting probably at the 2, 3, 4, 5 year out sort of time frame. So when we're exploring these options and communicating them with communities, we're not talking about next year. We're probably talking about 3, 4, 5, 6, in many cases out to 10 years and beyond. So I've got 3 slides here, and I'm just going to summarize them real quick. During the fall, we conducted a series of community forums and had a series we had a community survey that was conducted, and we asked 3 different questions around this notion of trade-ups. And categorically, what we asked in 3 different ways, but by and large, when you ask in almost an abstract the notion of balancing capacity utilization and likening it how this is vital to the schools, we have a marginal preference towards yes versus no. However, it's probably in the 50 to 60% sort of range. I think it was around 57. When you ask the same body of people, which we did, the same question in the notion of improved facilities, that jumps up to around 70%. When you ask the same question yet again around the actual human being impact of improved educational, or the quality of education and student supports, that jumps all the way up to like 85%. What this tells us is that it's absolutely essential that we frame the conversations that we have, not just around numbers and cost savings and these sorts of things, but really around how it's going to create better opportunities for families and communities. It would be irresponsible for us to consider what happens after a consolidation. So a repurposed facility would be one where it's no longer a school. However, we're looking for higher and better use for these assets that could be put in place to improve educational opportunities for students, whether it's in operational supports for the school system, partnerships with other agencies, even the direct sale, which could generate capital that could be reinvested in other properties. Or even, I'd like to signal down towards the bottom, a creative, now complicated, but creative solution that could help you not just solve your facilities issues, but perhaps even some barriers to some of your staffing challenges that I'm hearing about. If, for instance, a property was put up through a private developer for some sort of mixed-use development that would include housing, you could have contractual requirements as the owners of the property to suggest that a certain fraction of the housing could be set aside for affordable housing that could be used for staff, particularly in hard-to-recruit to areas where the cost of living is really high.
So, ask questions. I saw you look at me. You know this is near and dear to my heart.
I'm going to let you jump in there, Trustee Church, because I've never seen you so happy in nearly 2 years.
I'm chomping at the bit.
Go for it.
So I've been a long advocate of researching housing opportunities. Why sell it to a developer? Why couldn't we develop our own housing?
It's a great question, and the primary function of the school district really is about delivering vital, education fundamentally, but also critical social services to communities. Being a landlord, being a developer really is not typically a core function of a system like this, and often agencies will outsource that component through a public-private partnership relationship. These are complicated scenarios, and there's several very good examples around the country. But in cases like yours, the many urban school districts that have surplus properties, they look for creative ways to leverage those into solving not just a facilities problem, but other problems too.
All right, I'm going to dig in here. So based on your experience, you've seen other school districts or governmental agencies provide housing to critical staff?
We see a lot of investigation on that front, and an example that comes to mind where I believe that has actually come to fruition is in Kansas City, where they had dramatic numbers of schools that were closed, and they opened it up to different community-based organizations and developers, and there were a lot of different outcomes, which I believe included some housing.
Do you think that helped their recruiting and retention?
I can't speak directly to that, but logically would bear out that that would be perhaps removing some barriers.
And I can say I've researched it a bit, and there are agencies, school districts and otherwise, that do housing. My sister was a teacher in Arizona. She had, and I never asked her whether it was subsidized or free, but she had government-provided housing. And my dad worked in the mines, and he got housing. And I was in the military, and sometimes it was a sleeping bag and a tent, but I got housing, so it's not a novel concept. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Trustee Church.
And just moving on with the program, we have made enhancements to this process, and I've outlined some of those here. And while it's easy to say this program is in this facilities optimization plan is around closing schools, and that's absolutely not, that's false. This is around improving opportunities for students with real emphasis on the majority of the capital investments you're going to make are just in direct enhancements and renovations to your existing facilities and aging infrastructure. There will be opportunities for those trade-ups as we've described. And while we study this, we looked at it, there may be more than a dozen different opportunities for things like this, which sounds dramatic to take it all in, but when we look at the timeline of capital funding and getting projects accomplished to be able to do this not just as a one-off, but rather as a trade-up scenario, we're being responsible at looking at the number of these that could be reasonably done within the near term and prioritizing those that, that make the most sense and have the support of the community. We're looking at...
Words are important. Near term. I don't know what you mean by that.
Appreciate the point of clarification. So we're looking at about a 10-year capital plan. We look about 20 years out to responsibly plan for 10 years of investments so we can lay out a capital plan that can be delivered on and executed in a predictable way. Absolutely. But this longer timeline isn't just taking longer to do it, but actually taking more steps, more touches with the heartbeats that are affected by these decisions. We're looking at opportunities not just to communicate and speak and show PowerPoints, but also perhaps even to take constituents on tours of a lot of your amazing success stories of newly refreshed or newly rebuilt campuses, so that while you can in your head think, yeah, I see it on the screen, but I like being close to home or whatever, but when you walk and feel what it might be like to be in a new state-of-the-art facility, people can start to feel it a little bit more with their hearts. And also we do look at this as an opportunity to perhaps refresh, and we had a bit of a pause in our process to retool and redesign, but as we re-engage with the Stakeholder Advisory Committee, we have the opportunity perhaps to expand on the diversity of that body as well. So here we are with the timeline. We're still kind of in the step 4 stage of it, and it used to conclude around June with a brisk process. This is now extended towards the end of the year as part of it, and most present in front of us will be starting very soon with some of those communities that have the most near-term dramatic potential of these sorts of trade-up scenario impacts, that we're starting those conversations now. So we have not just a quick hit in the fall, take a survey, done. We're starting the conversations now, beginning those and following through with surveys, et cetera, tours, so that there's opportunity not just for this to be a presentation and gut check, but rather a conversation and learning and dialogue as part of the process.
May I just say I really appreciate that. Sorry, I so appreciate that, because it feels more like we're doing this together rather than we're doing this to you. And I think that's really important, and thank you for
Absolutely.
that.
And from Dr. Enfield throughout the organization, we all look at this change as a dramatic improvement and blessing. So after this begins in the very near term, we want to start in the fall and get people's attention while we still can in the spring before the end of the school year. There will be a little bit of lull of activity during the summer, which is normal. We don't like to do planning and engagement over the summer because it's really concrete barriers, or when people aren't around or focused and engaged in their schools. And then we'll pick back up in the fall after school has started and have a round of community forums and surveys and outreach, particularly around where there's the trade-up scenarios are present, and be able to reach a point of conclusion, recommendations for your potential action towards the end of the school year, or end of the calendar year. That concludes the CAM part of the presentation. I appreciate the questions, and if there's anything else.
Thank you very much. I would like to say that this absolutely aligns with my expectations for the facilities modernization plan. A foundational element of the promise of WC1 was looking at our established neighborhoods and bringing modern and equitable learning environments to those communities. We are not the same community that we were 50, 60 plus years ago, which is the age of some of these schools. And this reflects not even a plan based on where our district is today, but where we project to be and where we want to be 5, 10 plus years from now. And it's that kind of vision that I really appreciate. And so, sorry, we've got some mics on. I want you to know that we have not seen a plan. We have not seen formal recommendations yet, but it is within my own expectation that this is going to happen, which means we will reimagine what education looks like, the communities that go to schools, how we create educational environments with other opportunities. So this very much aligns with what my personal expectation was, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the plan when it comes. I see Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam President. Going back to the slide, it doesn't have a number on it, but the repurposed facilities, I think it has a slide with Trustee Church's champion issue on it. The question I have for you is district use. I don't see charter schools on there. And we have some of our sponsored charter schools, even state charter schools, that could possibly be repurposed or relocated. Case in point, ACE charter school is probably going to get pushed out from airport expansion. Again, I'm not putting that on the table, but I mean, could there be a chance? Should we? And I know it's very early, but should we have to, consolidate into other schools? Could we provide schools to some of our charter partners. Would that be on the table?
I work across the country, and those sorts of outcomes do happen from time to time. In some jurisdictions, it's actually a requirement that first right of refusal be given to charter schools, like in California with Chapter 39.
I would just consider us, I would just consider you to think about that going forward, is perhaps reaching out with some of the charters, should we go down that path?
Appreciate the question. And just a point of clarification as well, and to manage expectations as well. When we provide our recommendations towards the end of the year, we're not necessarily going to have specific outcomes for any repurposed recommendations of facilities, but we may have explored these through conversations and list suggested ones. Like I said, these are going to take years to implement, and these are complicated changes. However, I just wanted to declare, for the community at large in particular, that when we look at any of these scenarios, we're doing it responsibly in a way that isn't just shuttering and creating a blight in any community.
Yeah. So my comment would probably be better directed to Mr. Searcy and his staff then. Keep on your radar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Clerk Rodriguez, Trustee Church.
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Number one, I think what I'm hearing is there very well could be some recommendations for closing some of the schools.
Yes, and you might recall from our very first presentation to you, we showed the slide of on the table, off the table conversations that we had, and with the full direction of leadership to explore all opportunities in the best interest of students. Not to say that it absolutely will happen, but there quite possibly could be recommendations.
And I think I can say, in my own opinion, with confidence, there won't be any blight. Our properties are very valuable. They're not going to sit empty. I can guarantee that, in my opinion. Have you had a chance to look at Incline Village specifically as far as their needs?
My team has studied all three of those facilities from tip top, and I've walked all three myself. And I have a very good feel for the challenges, particularly due to the small scale and declining enrollment, the geographical location of where they are, as well as the cost of housing. So we are looking very closely at that particular area within its own context, particularly with the weather you're experiencing. You often will become an island, and we want to take care of you like that.
And you probably know where I'm going with this. Are you going to make recommendations regarding housing?
Possibly. It's premature to make any sort of statements like that, but we're looking at all scenarios that make sense in the better interest of the students up there.
And finally, what I think
if I may, Trustee Church, the way that I understand the process is that first we would make decisions about how we're going to imagine educational locations and the communities that may go to those new schools. Once those have been adopted and we have areas that will no longer be schools at some point in the future, then the board would be able to say, what is the best use of these? So it'll be like a two-part conversation, if that makes any sense. Is that accurate?
And absolutely accurate. And also just to point out, the next step is when we want to engage these school communities directly, and to start talking about any sort of recommendations before we've actually gone through the process would be disingenuous. So out of respect to these communities, we want to talk to them first.
And then finally, I probably didn't hear right, but talking to Trustee Mayberry's question, you said something about you wouldn't make recommendations, you'd make suggestions, or I probably heard that wrong, but where do you make recommendations and where do you just kind of lay out the facts?
In a facilities modernization plan such as this, typically what we'll recommend is the sort of capital investments that you're going to make, but it's within the construct of the educational vision of the district, as well as organizational changes and initiatives that are set forward, and the alternative uses of your assets. We can hint at what you might want to consider in there and what we've heard through the process and what viably makes sense professionally in our opinion. However, as far as make this one a community center, make this one elder care, make this one an opportunity to sell, those sorts of things, we won't get specific about those sites that way. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Trustee Woodley.
Thank you, Madam President. This is specific to Mr. Searcy. I understand that, of course, you can't necessarily rely on this information because you don't know if it's accurate or not, but are we taking into consideration future development and possible developers that may be offering acres, dozens of acres of land for a proposed school, notwithstanding the fact, of course, that you don't know that it's actually going to happen until permits are in hand? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Again, for the record, Adam Searcy. All of our capital planning does include, to the best of our ability, consideration of upcoming and planned development and the students that are likely to be generated from that housing and the timing of it. All of that's incorporated and has been shared with Canon Design, and any facility modernization capital projects would be included in the annual capital improvement plan in addition to any new schools. So it is a very multifaceted analysis, and yes, absolutely, to your point, it includes consideration of all active and future planned residential development.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so this is an item for presentation and discussion. Are there any other questions? This is definitely going to be coming back. I don't see any other lights on for right now, so I'm going to say thank you so much for this time and for this presentation. This is exciting for this community. This is the future of education for children that are not even born yet, which is really amazing that we get to touch the future of our community in this way. So thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of item 3.01. And now we'll move on to 3.02. And this is the presentation and discussion on the progress and schedule of the district-wide strategic planning process conducted by Performance Fact. This is also for presentation and discussion. And so I am going to open this up to Dr. Susan Enfield and then Mutwi Fagbai. Hi, Susan. Did I
Hi, President
horribly
Smith.
butcher?
That was a very solid attempt. It's Muthu Fagbai, who is the CEO of Performance Fact. And I'm going to ask Michelle Anderson to also come up and sit at the table because she's been our point of contact within the district between Muthu and his team. We officially launched our strategic planning process within the last couple of weeks and wanted to provide the board, with an introduction to Muthu and some of his team, but also then to walk through what the process is going to look like and discuss opportunities for trustees to engage in this process as well. And so with that, I will turn it over to Muthu and to Rose.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks, Susan. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to meet you. Thanks for giving us a chance to spend a few minutes with you. I'm actually going to ask Rose to do a quick self-intro, and then I'll take over and walk through what we've prepared for this evening. Rose?
Hello, my name is Rose Wagner. I just recently joined Performance Fact. I'm excited to work with your team. We spent a lot of time with them last week and looking forward to seeing them next week as well.
Thanks, Rose. So I'd like to begin by saying we're here only to be truly helpful. I hope you're all used to my accent already. It's from Nigeria, but this is year 50. I've been here a long time. Brief background, my formal training is as a chemical engineer. I have my undergraduate and graduate degrees in chemical engineering. I worked for Eastman Kodak as a scientist for a number of years, got interested, just teaching hands-on science to one fourth grade class, and I got hooked. That was more than 30 years ago. So I quit my job being a scientist, and I've been working with schools and school districts since the late 1980s. So that's the background that I bring to this work. We're based in Oakland, California, but a big chunk of our work is actually outside the state of California itself. What I'd like to do is take about maybe 10, 15 minutes, give you an orientation to the process and to the products, and then be more than happy to take your questions. I want to point your attention to the blue circle because it puts our role, how we see our role, in perspective. We're not here to tell you what to do. We don't tell our clients what to do. We see our role as facilitators, and a facilitator is a guide. A guide does not command or control. It wouldn't work anyway. But a guide does direct. We've done this with more than 100 school districts across the U.S. since the 1990s. So we have a lot of experience. And yet we recognize that all we know is not all there is to learn. So most of our learning actually comes from, working with each client and treating them as if it's that even though there are many things they have in common with other districts, each district has its own unique characteristics. And it is those we try to tune into. And I hope you will see that in the process that I'm going to share with you. 4 areas I want to touch on today. First part is the process itself, quick overview. The second part would be to give you an idea of how we plan to, or how we're engaging stakeholders from diverse perspectives, and also show you the calendar. You have samples of the strategic plans for several districts available to you, but I'll also show you a few to especially highlighting the goals and what we call the strategy map. And then finally, one of the questions that was raised earlier is what's kind of just one slide to share with you on that. I'm going to skip this one. So why plan? Our suggestion is that the primary purpose of planning is alignment, getting all the arrows going in the same direction. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to recognize that the arrows on the right will produce better results than the arrows on the left. So you cannot have a really good plan without involving the stakeholders. And I'll get to that in a few moments. All of our work starts with this question. I belong to the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. And when you meet a Yoruba person, within a minute and a half, they're going to ask you, "Àwọn monko, how are the children?" So all of our work starts by grounding ourselves and our clients in data, very much like what Paul and Adam described on the facility side. So this is a quick profile of our students at WCSD, roughly equal amounts of Hispanic and white students, and then that's student groups. So it's a very diverse school district in that sense. There are other ways of thinking about our students in terms of programs to qualify for. About 3 out of every 20 are students with disabilities. Roughly the same number or same ratio are English learners. And about 55% of them, at least for in the 22-23 school year, come from homes classified as low income. 11 out of every 20 are economically disadvantaged. And those numbers also play out in the data. So it has some survey data with kudos to Dr. Davidson for providing this to us. And we also have some academic data. There are 2 slides. This slide I want to go through very quickly because there's a lot that's in this one slide. In the first column, several areas, English language arts performance, math, science, graduation rate, absenteeism, and suspension rate. And what we're trying to show here is the intersection of race and ethnicity versus economic status. So let's look at Hispanic students, for example. So I hope you can see my cursor here. So on the statewide English language arts test, 5 out of every 20 Hispanic students who are economically disadvantaged, who are classified as economically disadvantaged, pass the state test. 10 out of every 20 Hispanic students who are not economically disadvantaged pass the state test. And you can see the same kind of trend, Native Hawaiian students, multiracial, pretty much every social ethnic, every racial ethnic group. And it pretty much carries across all of them. So our students are much more challenged when they come from low-income households than when they come from high-income households. So again, this chart is showing you the intersection of race and ethnicity versus economic status. One more I want to show before we move on. It's the same kind of analysis, except this time it's race and ethnicity versus disability status. So if we look at Black students in this case, and we look at mathematics, Black students who are also special ed, out of every 20 of them, only 1 out of every 20 passes state test in math. Black students who are not special ed, 3 out of 20. And you can see the spread across all the subgroups. So I wanted to start with some data because that's really what we're trying to effect. We want to create different experiences for our students so that all of them, without exception, over time, will meet the high standards and high expectations and the desires that we have as parents, as taxpayers, as trustees, and even the students themselves. So how are we doing this strategic planning piece? We believe that if we want people to be committed to the plan, we have to involve them in putting the plan together. So we place a very high premium on embracing diverse voices. We don't come in with a plan for WCSD. We don't have the answers. We have some ideas. Our primary role, again, is really to facilitate the conversation, to bring the community to coalesce around its best thinking for what's best for all students. And the way we do that is through a series of teams. So at the center of all the teams is one we call the core planning team. That team has about 40, 50 people, and it consists of all stakeholders. Michelle Anderson can say more about how they were selected. Then orbiting the core planning team, other teams also, for example, roughly in the 12 o'clock position, we have the student voice team that we'll be spending some time with. Roughly in the 11 o'clock position, between 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock, we have the instructional focus team, which is made up mostly of teachers and instructional staff and support staff. We'll be holding 5 community forums across the entire district, beginning very early. In fact, we start next week with 2 forums scheduled, one on the 7th and one on the 8th. Again, that'll be a total of 5. We meet regularly with the board to provide updates and also even more intensive opportunities for the board to share their perspective. We met last week with a team called the alignment team. I like to describe them tongue-in-cheek as the movers and shakers. So you have your business leaders there, the county folks, and foundation people were at that meeting last week. And before the plan is done, it's going to go to every campus in the district and every department also. So the work is going on at multiple levels and with multiple stakeholders simultaneously. And it's not done until it's done. This is just gives you the calendar we've laid out. This is page 1 of 3 calendar pages for alignment team, the board, the core planning team, instructional focus team, and so on. And again, you have copies of this in your handout. Okay. So I want to give you a feel for what...
Mr. Fagbai?
Yes, please.
I wanted to
that was
just...
great.
Thank you. If we could just stay on slide 20 for just one... Oh, I'm sorry. It's actually slide 19 for just one moment. I see how the community forums are all listed as on-site, but I believe that there will also be virtual options, and that's really important to me because many of our families may not be able to attend an in-person meeting. Can we just clarify that briefly, please?
Yeah, actually, I spoke with Michelle just a few hours ago about that. That will work perfectly for us too. We have a lot of clients doing that. Whatever works for the district, we can accommodate.
Thank you. That would be my personal recommendation, is that we also create virtual options for families who may not be able to be on site or get to one of these.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's an easy yes.
Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. So I want to give you a feel for the products, and I like to suggest we do that in 2 ways. I'll walk you through a few slides, and then maybe we'll just take a few minutes time out for you to look at the samples that you've been provided. Specifically, the model that we're running is framed around these 3 circles, and they really tell a story, and the order of the circles is really very important also. We suggest that the only ENDS that we have as an education institution will be outcomes for students. So it's what we call circle number 1 is only about student learning, just outcomes for kids. We don't care what the adults are going to do, what the adults want, not yet, until we first reach consensus across the entire school system around what we want for students. And on the far right are the kinds of things that fall into circle number 1. Last week, the core planning team developed a draft of the Portrait of a Graduate, which we can show you if time permits. They also have a set of goals and measures of student progress. So in 2 days, they got a lot of work done. And next week, we do the same thing with the teacher team on the 7th and on the 8th. Then the evening of the 7th and the 8th, we will bring those drafts to the community forums and invite the entire community to weigh in on the work that's been developed. And that's how everything falls, everything rolls. So the first part of the work is always about the students. The second part is about instruction, because the strongest driver of student learning is the quality of instruction. In other words, it's about teachers and teaching in general. And then the third circle, we call that the empowering infrastructure. In one sense, the presentation from Adam and Paul just a few moments ago fits into a third circle. Having really nice facilities designed to support instruction is one of the ways one of the empowering infrastructure we need to have in place. So these three circles, you can think of them as how the final report will be presented. One chapter on outcomes for students, one chapter on what we must do well to get the outcomes for students, and then one chapter on the infrastructure that we must put in place to make sure that instruction is effective so that we can get our kids home. And another way of thinking about the components, is same three blocks, but just framed differently. That one set of outputs will be about what we value, one set of outputs will be about what we want for students, and then what we must do well. So this slide and the previous slide are really saying the same thing. Okay, so let's look at some examples. And on this page, two school districts, both happen to be in Washington State, that have defined their goals. And you will see that they have a few things in common, but none of them is exactly the same. And that's the way it's going to go with what I show also. What makes sense for WCSD, and that's what needs to be developed and determined communally. It doesn't come from outside, doesn't come from us. We guide the process. The district on the right, on the left, has 4 goals for their school system. The district on the right has 5 goals for their school system. But again, you can see their first goals are pretty much, they cover the same area, but they have a few things that are different also. Once we have the goal determined, then we need to talk about what we must do well to accomplish the goals. And the approach that we recommend is for us to imagine that we have to build a house, and we can build a house on only 4 foundations. We call them our 4 pillars. We need one foundation that will address teaching and learning, one foundation that recognizes that schools can't do it alone, one foundation that's about investing in people, and one foundation that's about managing the whole. So it's those 4 generic labels. This is not yours, obviously. This is another school district. It is those 4 generic labels: teaching and learning, schools can't do it alone, investing in people, and managing the whole. They're the organizers we offer to think through what makes the most sense for WCSD. I'm going to stop now and just ask you to take a couple minutes, look at one or more of the sample reports. That's Michelle, do they have the hard copies or just the electronic copies?
Yes, they do have hard copies.
Okay, I'd love to pause for a couple minutes for you to just browse through the hard copies you have, and then I'll wrap up.
Hello, Trustee Diane Nicolette here. I want to back up to slide 9. I don't believe we need to show it. It's a quick question. I'm certain that gifted and talented students are in here somewhere. I do not see them referenced, especially on that slide where we talk about students with disabilities, English learner, and economically disadvantaged. Just a point. And then if you don't mind just taking a minute to just help me understand, all of us actually. You said it's not done until it's done. What are the variables for identifying done? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If I could take the second part of your question, the done basically means until it comes to the board and it's formally approved. So until the very last date, it's still open for discussion and debate. So that's what I was referring to when I meant not done until the board formally approves it. And until that date comes around, it's still work in progress.
Thank you. And then the gifted and talented
Thank
question.
you. Yes, actually, I selected just a few slides from a 40-page data booklet, which we can make available to you also. And everything is broken down, and there's sections of the larger report where the gifted and talented is actually called out and spelled out, separately. It wasn't one of the examples that I chose.
Okay.
That was an oversight on it.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. I will encourage you, all of you, really, you have really rich data. Much of it came from the district. A few things we repackaged, just to come to express the same data in other ways. But every group we work with looks at the data, every single group, including the community forum folks too. And I will encourage you to do the same thing, because you will have insights that we don't have because we don't live in your context. So we need you to guide us through the meaning making also, because you understand the context. Okay, it's great. So if I could then just wrap up so that I can get to your questions. The question was raised about what impact a good strategic plan could have, and I just offer a few slides here. I want to start with on the left, the blue bar, the blue box here. The strategic plan represents our collective dreams, not nightmare, and it hopes and dreams for all of our students. But dreams wouldn't work unless we do. This would be just a fancy 4-color document if the commitment is not there to implement with fidelity. So in other words, after we plan the work, we have to work the plan. And that's where a number of school districts actually fall apart. They'll develop a strategic plan, they spend a lot of hours, they spend a lot of money, and then they go do something else that they find more interesting. So you will see that in terms of the impact, the real impact initially will be, emotional or psycho-emotional. We're all on the same page, we know where we're going, we're clear about what we want for students, everyone is on board. It's very kumbaya type phase of the work. The real work, really, it's about the implementation. And how do we make sure we follow through? We use the goals in the strategic plan to drive the work. We align our resources to those goals. We make sure we develop our people based on the skills they need to pull off the practices and the goals, not on a whim. Professional development is aligned to capacity building to drive the plan. And we have accountability at all levels, not only for those within the school system, but also for parents, for stakeholders, for the community, and so on. It's not impossible to do. And the more broadly we embrace all stakeholders, the more likely it is that we can pull this off. Final point, I want to go back to the 4 pillars we talk about. This strategic plan is not just the district strategic plan. It belongs to the entire county. And that's why our 4 foundations has teaching and learning as one of the foundations. Schools can't do it alone as a foundation. Investing in people as another foundation, and then having processes for managing the whole so we can get the results we're looking for. Thank you. I think my last slide is just one way we assist our clients and partners in implementing their plan. And it sort of speaks for itself. I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that information. This is all very exciting. It's my first strategic plan that I've been a part of. There is one area, though, that I have spoken about with Superintendent Enfield, and that is, although I am thrilled with this being presented to us and getting updates along the way, I would like to see an additional layer where this Board of Trustees and the individual trustees can also give direct and actionable feedback about these goals, and what the vision is. As much as I am thrilled to get the updates, and those are important, I would like to see an opportunity built in where we can actually also provide our values, priorities, and interests. And I'm sure that they will overlay with other things that we're hearing, because quite frankly, we get these from our community members.
Correct.
So it's not something for us to solve right now because this is not an item for action, but I do want to point out that I believe that that should be a stronger layer to this process.
Trustee Smith, President Smith, rather, I'll address that. So I will be speaking with you and trustees around what that specifically will look like in terms of providing opportunities to interact with representatives from each of the teams that you see listed here, so that you can actually engage with them on what it is those teams are talking about and what is sort of bubbling to the surface as priorities. And so I will have that conversation with you and others subsequent to this presentation.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, because as a body, we will adopt a plan later this year. But individually, I would like to make sure that our 7 voices and what it is that we hear from our community are reflected in the step 1 layers of this. So it's not added on afterwards, but is rather built and woven into this whole process. So thank you very much, Superintendent Enfield.
If I may, that was actually an oversight on my part too. If you look at the diagram on the screen, we see the board as a body, as a team itself, and they get a chance to participate as a team. I think that's what Dr. Enfield was just referring to, and that's the request you're making. The board as an entity cannot just sit back until the very last minute. So they are involved and taken along fairly actively in the process also. Sorry, I didn't mention that already.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Trustee Church.
Thank you, and thank you, President Smith, for bringing that up, because once again, I'll bring up my concern. This is not an action item. It should be an action item. This should be done in a public forum, not me one-on-one with somebody else telling them my opinion. This should be an action item. If it's an action item, it allows but doesn't mandate opinions and actions and motions. As a non-action item, our hands are completely tied. That being said, I do notice one really incredible statistic, and that's that approximately 42% of our student body are Hispanic Latino. That's slide number 8, I think. Para los que hablan español, 42% son Latinos. I just translated that. How do we address that? And my next question along that line, that doesn't assume that they're Spanish speaking, that they're not Spanish speaking, that they're fluent in English, but it presents an interesting dynamic. Does that affect, and do you weigh in at all on diversity training? Is that part of the strategic plan, how we teach diversity with that kind of a diverse student body?
Well, we don't. It's not an area of expertise for my firm. There are other folks out there that do that much better than we do. And we'd be more than happy to recommend, if asked.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. My other concern, more of a statement.
I'm sorry.
I've been on the board for 2 years. The last strategic plan that I saw had a lot of 50-cent words, as we call it. I can only read at the 25-cent word level. And in my opinion, strategic plans should be written so that the general public can understand them, not written for PhDs. The last one, I remember reading a paragraph into the record that very few people could understand. So how do you weigh in on that? How clear, how down to earth is the strategic plan?
I think we generally down to earth people, and this is Yakima which has 80% Hispanic, about a third of whom are English learners. And what you're looking at is the portrait of that graduate. So it's very simple language, the vision for our promise, core values. And it's one thing we pride ourselves on. And I hope you've picked it up too, even when I talk about the foundations of the plan, the four pillars. It's language like teaching and learning is one foundation. Schools can't do it alone. It's the second foundation. Investing in people is the third foundation. Managing the whole is the fourth one. Then you get to call those any technical terms you want. But this, I really resonate with the point you're making, and we spend a lot of time. How do we democratize access to every part of the world? So it's not just in the choice of words. I hope you also saw it in the way we presented data to you, by using colors and talking about 4 out of every 20 students or 9 out of every 20 students, instead of saying 37.349%. We try to, humanize it, because if we want folks to really buy into it, we have to talk in language they can relate to. So we use language and data to democratize access to the entire exercise. Test us on that as we go through the process with you and we produce a finished product. We want to hear from you about what meets your needs, what's understandable and what's not, and we'll fix it.
Mutu, could I weigh in there? Trustee Church, you raise a very important point, and I want to be clear. The language that we use in this plan will be our language. It's not performance facts language, and I couldn't agree with you more that we need to move away from jargon, and we need to use language that resonates with our families and with our community and represents our priorities. And so I can assure you that that will be central to this process. In fact, maybe we can even get some 10-cent words in there as well.
I'll even go for a buffalo nickel, but thank you. Yeah, wonderful to hear that, because it's nice to hear my voice gets heard once in a while. So thank you on that. And I really appreciated the comments about we can't do it alone. I spoke earlier about mental health, not just being a school district issue, but being a county issue. So whatever we're talking about in terms of the strategic plan, I think that one pillar is extremely important to recognize, whether it's through nonprofits like the Boys and Girls Club and communities and schools, et cetera, or whether it's through the county, the cities, et cetera. So that's a very important pillar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much for this. We look forward to talking more and appreciate you hearing all of our thoughts and feedback. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. All right. So that closes item 3.02. And now we will move on to 3.03. This is our ongoing series on the quality of education. This is the review of English language proficiency assessments and smarter balanced assessment in mathematics and English language arts data for English language learners, and how Washoe County School District uses the information to improve the student learning outcomes for our English language learners. This is for presentation and discussion, and we welcome Dr. Troy Parks, our Chief Academic Officer, Joe Ernst, our Chief Accountability Officer, and Megan Wah, our Director of the Department of English Language Development. Thank you for being here.
President Smith, Superintendent Enfield, Deputy Superintendent Keogh, Board of Trustees, Joe Ernst, Chief Accountability Officer. And in an effort to try to get as efficient as we can with going over some comprehensive information, previously we've shared some data with our Board of Trustees, along with some comprehensive notes and analysis related to that data. What we wanted to do today is really spend the majority of our time looking at what are the district strategies that are being implemented to best support our English language learners. And so with that in mind, I do want to turn it over to our Associate Chief of Specialized Instruction, Ms. Jennifer Van Tress, and our Director of English Language Development, Ms. Megan Wah.
Thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon, President Smith, Deputy Superintendent Keough, Superintendent Enfield, wherever you are, and members of the board. For the record, I'm Megan Waugh, the Director of the Department of English Language Development. So this first slide outlines ways our department is addressing some academic disparities that we're seeing, as well as the different models used across the district. So for academic disparities, you can see that we are working to not only build that Tier 1 language-rich instruction for our English language English language learners, sorry about that, but we are also working across the continuum to try and focus on mainstreaming our EL models across the district. When we look at the models of instruction, you can see that we do have several different models going on. A lot of that depends on the population size of our EL students within each individual school, as well as the different levels of school. So for elementary, you can see there we have our campus ELD support schools. There are 10 of these schools that have 15 or less EL students, and these schools typically are supported by a campus teacher who is also ELAD endorsed, receives a stipend per an MOU that we have with the district, and does some of that front loading and that building capacity amongst the teachers on his or her site. We are shifting next year to that being supported by one ELD site facilitator for those schools. We have schools that have our more traditional role of the EL teacher, and then we have schools that have the ELD site facilitator role. For our secondary models, again, we have some schools that do utilize the site facilitator model. Our secondary schools offer EL-specific courses for some credit attainment, and then a lot of our schools will just focus mainly on those co-taught classes. We have schools, both elementary and middle, that have kind of hybrid. So for example, our 4 largest elementary schools have both a site facilitator as well as the EL teacher, so that we continue to build the capacity of the staff, but also providing that large population of EL learners with direct supports. We also brought on another high school, so Hug High School is an example of that. They have 2 EL site facilitator, which are coaches, as well as 5 EL teachers supporting. And then we have 4 designated newcomer high schools. This year started with North Valleys, and then also Hug, Sparks, and Wooster, and 3 newcomer middle schools. Our new one this year is O'Brien, and then Sparks and Pine as well.
Question? I'm sorry, very quickly. Newcomer schools, I understand that. So if Diane lives not close to Hug, then Diane will take a transportation to Hug?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Our middle school students are transported all 3 years. So the graders, they're transported to their newcomer site until through their 8th grade year. Our high schoolers currently are transported for 1 year of a newcomer program, and then they resume at their zone school. Additionally, attending one of these newcomer sites is per the family's request. So they do not have to go to a newcomer site. They may choose to stay at their zone school. So this is a breakdown. It kind of just dives a little deeper into what that ELD site facilitator model looks like. You can see that a majority of it is spent in that capacity building. So with teachers, working hand in hand with teachers, coaching them, modeling, observing, asking reflective type questionings, etc. There is a portion of that time that is spent with direct services to our EL students. Typically, our EL site facilitators work with our students who are maybe level 1 or 2, which are our lowest level proficient students. And then that last portion is more of those administrative duties, so the assessment, data collection, compliancy type records, etc. So this breaks down, this is a look at your more traditional EL teacher role, which we look at in 3 different steps. One being those direct services, again, small group pull out or push in. And within those small group, they are getting the explicit language instruction. Then we look at, again, a co-teach model where they're in the classroom teaching alongside the teacher, and ideally that lesson has been pre-planned with the teacher. And then more of a consultation type support
where they may be consulted on different strategies that the gen ed teacher may use, checking in with teachers, monitoring our students, etc. So finally, these are some next steps and considerations that we are looking at. One is to utilize that new weighted funding for ELs to develop and implement staffing guidelines, which takes not only our students within our lowest proficient levels and then up through the levels, but also those students who are monitored into consideration, because once a student exits, they are still continue to be monitored for the next 4 years. So that also requires staff to do so. We want to continue to grow that ELD site facilitator model and really measure the fidelity to the model. We will continue to work with our family and school partnerships to ensure that our families' voices and parent engagement are at a high level.
May I? Thank you. There's so much here. I don't want to miss it.
I know, we're kind of going faster.
That's okay, and thank you for this. So in the site facilitator EL model, where are we with the all teachers as English
of language learners?
Thank you. Yeah, where are we with that?
So we are working towards that. That is the main component of that ELD site facilitator, is to build the capacity, so coach the teachers to become teachers of language as well as content. All content there's language for all content, but we don't always explicitly teach that language. So say maybe around math or social studies. So that is the main goal, is to work with teachers to help coach them along in teaching that content specific language alongside and embedded with the content itself. Moving on with some more next steps and considerations is to continue to work in collaboration with other departments such as curriculum and instruction, Department of Accountability, so that we can offer that comprehensive support all around the Tier 1 instruction, which is so important for all learners. We are developing professional learning plans within that 3-year span, and all of this will be centered on that explicit language instruction for all staff to be able to do. And then finally, we do intend to open a newcomer welcome center. It should launch with this 23-24 school year, and with that will be an opportunity for us to be a source of information to welcome our new to country families and to begin to inform them and educate them on the United States educational system. That's all I have. So we have time for some questions.
Thank you. Ms. Watt, so question on the Newcomer Center. Will we provide transportation for those families?
So we are strategically placing the Newcomer Center in a central location that is along bus lines, etc. We could look at possibly offering some vouchers for buses, taxis, things like that, because we do want them to be able to access that. We are working in collaboration with entities such as like the NNIC or the Northern Nevada International Center, so we can work with them on ensuring that our families do get transportation to that center.
I know this is not an item for action, so I will just give my 2 cents. I think that this is a wonderful model and I support it, but access to individual transportation, particularly if a family may not have any personal transportation, or if they are lucky enough to have one, that single source may be used for a parent or an adult to make their way to work. So I would strongly be interested in looking for ways to get these children to their locations and happen to be at a zone school. So without it being an action item, that's just my 2 cents to that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Trustee Church.
All right, I won't mention the AP word. However, as a bilingual person, when this first came out, we heard it a couple years ago or a year ago, I did the deep dive, and it is such a complicated subject. I'm not qualified to weigh in, so I just trust your judgment on that. One slide, I want to kind of point out to my fellow trustees that haven't dealt with a second language. It's not easy. And as you have on there, listening, speaking, reading, writing, comprehension. They're all different. I mean, a lot of the reading, when I read a newspaper, I got to have a dictionary because some of the words they use, it's very slow going. And listening, if you miss a word and you fall behind, while speaking, I do much better because I'm the one picking the word. So, yeah, it's a complicated subject, and it's difficult, and I appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Trustee Mayberry.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the presentation. I had a question on the refugees. I obviously know what the word refugees means, but is there a specific designation that the school district provides when we have students come from other countries? Is that just simply refugee?
No. So refugees are those that are fleeing their country or seeking asylum in the United States. So they do have a different designation, whereas a new to country student is any student or family that has entered the country within that school year. So there is a difference. So when we look at our refugee families, it's just a bit of a different context when we identify them.
As a follow-up, do we get a heads up that we're getting refugee students?
If we are able to, so typically the communication may come from the Northern Nevada International Center to, in our department, we have a family liaison. Her role is specifically to provide that liaison service between our refugee families and the school district. So she will get communicated with that we, have a family that's coming to us maybe from Syria or the Congo, and then she works to get them in and provide them with the screening and get them enrolled in our school.
I was surprised to learn that these students, they don't get transportation to the newcomer schools. They only get transportation to their zone schools. Is that correct?
Well, elementary students, regardless of newcomer status, go to their zoned elementary school.
Thank you.
Our middle and high school students, if they choose to attend one of the newcomer sites, they do get transported. Middle school gets transported all 3 years. If they come in as sixth grade, for their entirety of being at that school. High school, however, only gets transported for 1 year.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I do also want to add that to be designated as a refugee, that's an official legal designation, correct? It's not a title or a label that we associate that.
Not at all. Yes, correct.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And thank you so much for providing some draft information on this to this board beforehand. That was a model that I really enjoyed, and I appreciated given the depth of this.
Thank you.
President Smith, Ivy has her hand up.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. Sorry about that, Ms. Botmal. Yes,
thank
please.
Thank you, Dr. Enfield, and thank you, President Smith. I thought it was a fabulous. I thought it was a fabulous presentation. I had one question. Many students at my school, and I know at other schools, starting at a young age, are brought into the English language learner classes, especially Hispanic students, and they are put into those classes, being provided the resources that they need. However, in long term, they realize that maybe some of those resources weren't appropriately used for them. I have met students who had never spoken any Spanish a day in their life, and it was a problem because they were labeled as somebody who was in need of those necessities, but they didn't necessarily need them. And it also has caused a lot of problems at my school in terms of segregation between Hispanic students and white students, because the Hispanic students who have been put into those classes have been labeled as lesser than and have not had as much access to opportunities as a lot of the white students have. So I was wondering, and recently this year we've also had a Ukrainian refugee, and she she did not speak any English, and so it was hard for her, of course, to engage with our community as well. So I was wondering if there was any resources in place to make sure that students are being engaged with their community while being in these programs, and also that we're ensuring that we're not stripping any students away from any sort of opportunity because they are in these programs.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. couple of things. First of all, a student is placed in EL based on what they call their home language survey. So when a parent enrolls a student, they fill out this home language survey. If they indicate that there is a language spoken in the home, or if it was the very first language spoken by the student that is other than English, then they are assessed or screened for their English proficiency, or their language proficiency, and then depending on the results of that screening, that's when they get designated as either an English learner or not. We do have a few incidences where we are running into students who maybe English is the only. However, for some reason, when they were screened, they fell below that proficiency level and were placed in the program. So what you're actually speaking about, Ivy, truly is one of the biggest, I think, pushes that I have personally for the ELD model, because that does keep our students mainstreamed into those Tier 1 content classes, allows them to build community and relationships with all students, as well as but still providing them with the language instruction that they need, because they do need very direct language instruction. But really all students do, not just English learners. All students need language instruction. So when we can scaffold and support within the Tier 1 classroom and allow these students to stay in, as opposed to being separated or put into a different area, then the better. And that's actually just good instruction for all students.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much for. Oh yes. Oh, I'm so sorry,
That's
Vice
okay.
President.
No.
I've got to I'm better at
That's
looking
okay.
right. Thank you.
I can get a string and just kind of. Ivy, you're brilliant. Thank you. A student voice is so important. It begs a question for me then. So the young lady that she referenced, to be able to really test the elements of language, was she tested in her home language, in Ukrainian, so that you can actually get a sense of where the student is?
Literacy levels, etc. Unfortunately, no. That is something that I am working on with our department, with the people within my department, is that we do need to find an assessment that will allow us to assess students in their first language, or L1 as we refer to it, so that we can then build a comprehensive support plan based on what their level is in that, because we know that, the higher level of literacy you are in your home language, the easier it is to acquire that second language. And so if we have that information on those students when they do come to the school, then the school can better then help support at the level that student needs to be supported at. So right now we are working to identify an assessment that might help us with that. A lot of our assessments are Spanish, etc., but we are finding that we need to span our language bank a lot broader now as we continue to grow in our different cultures that are joining us here in Washoe County.
President Smith, could I just address that very quickly? Thank
Yeah,
you,
absolutely.
Megan, for that. So I'm glad you raised that, Vice President Nicolette, and I want to confirm this with saying, with Dr. Keogh, I believe that, for example, our state assessments, they must take in English, that we don't have the option to assess them in, like on the Smarter Balanced, in anything else. Now, we have our assessments for our students to show proficiency in English. What I would love to see us to begin doing more of, and Megan, perhaps you can speak to this because I'm unaware, that we are providing more opportunities for students to gain credit by proficiency in their home language. And so those assessments do exist. So, and I mean, I can tell you in my former district, every year we added to the number of languages that we were assessing students in to show that they had proficiency. And I believe that we were up to close to 50. So I think that those resources exist, and I would love to see us expand those. But I believe that right now, the Smarter Balanced assessment that they must take has to be taken in English.
I am confirming that is correct.
Yes. Our state required assessments do need to be taken in English. However, what we would like to do is exactly what Superintendent Enfield was just speaking about, is find an assessment a screener, for lack of a better word, just something that will inform us on the level of proficiency in the student's native language, or L1. So then again, we can build that educational plan around that with that knowledge and provide it to the school.
Thank you very much. And this actually is another thing that just came up. Great conversation with Ms. Batmall and Vice President Nicolette. We also know that there's a connection to language spoken at home, and our RISE, our Academy for Adult Achievement, offers English language learner programs. Obviously, this content is, we're looking at K-12, but when we do have families, do we also cross-promote or make sure that the adults in their homes, or those that may be outside of K-12 education, also know that we provide adult services?
Yes, very much so. We provide them with all the resources that we have, with a list of resources for English classes, RISE being one of them, TMCC is another. So yeah, we do provide families with that. One, I think, great thing about the Newcomer Welcome Center is that that will be kind of that one place where all of that information is housed for these families. So when they come in, we welcome them. We can glean an understanding of their travels here, as well as past education in their home country, et cetera, and then also provide all this resource support for those families, which would include adult English classes.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the end of item 3.03. Thank you so much for presenting to us. Seeing as we're doing good on time, I know that the weather is continuing outside, so as we move into item 4 for reports, I do know that we do have some trustees that have some reports. So first we're going to go to item 4.01, and that's our student representatives report. So Ms. Batmall, do you have a report that you'd like to share?
Sure, I can just go real quickly. Next week, our council, we met last week and we were talking about everything that we've been talking about throughout the year. And we're excited that we're going to be meeting with the strategic planning team next Tuesday.
Thank you so much. So for our board colleagues, that brings us to item 4.02. So everyone, you have your 3 minutes technically. But if there are a few things you want to share, or you use a little bit less than 3 minutes, that would be great. But again, you have the full 3 minutes if you'd like it. Trustee Woodley.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be quick. So this past, actually before I get there, I want to acknowledge one of our Hug High School graduates. I had the privilege of mentoring him before he joined the Marine Corps. He graduated boot camp, and I was able to celebrate with his family last month. So he is currently stationed in North Carolina. I just want to say congratulations to Alvedo Lopez from Hug High School. Thank you. And then lastly, I just want to share that in my new role as a representative for the Washoe County School District on the board for NIAA, those who don't know, that's Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association. I was able to attend many games this past weekend, basketball games. I want to congratulate Reno girls basketball for their efforts. They put up a good fight. Unfortunately, they did fall in the finals to Bishop Manogue. But we did have some other schools, Pyramid High School. I know they're not in our school district, but they did a good job and they won this weekend. And then this is on behalf of my wife, because she's a Winnemucca Buckaroo Lowry High School graduate, and she played basketball for them, and they did win for the state championship. So congratulations to them as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Trustee Woodley. Trustee Church.
Thank you. I waive the 3 minutes. I will have public comment on the record, so I'll save you the 3 minutes.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Westlake.
Thank you. So I was invited to Sun Valley Elementary School when I toured the facility by the kindergarten teacher, Miss Rhonda Wise, and she invited me to come in and read to the kindergarten her kindergarten class. What an experience. I read The Giving Tree, which I ended up sniffling through, and it still gets me, and I've read that book probably, at least 50 times. And I've been invited back on a monthly basis to read to the kindergartners. I am super, super excited. I was so overwhelmed by the questions and the comments they had afterwards. One little girl in particular, she just awe. I just think the tree is magical. And I said, you're right, honey, it is magical. But just an amazing experience. I can't wait to do more of it. And I want to give a shout out to Jerry Whitehead Elementary School, which is just a hop, skip, and a roll up the street from my house. They are having their book fair. I went there the other day to buy books for my grandchildren. They have an amazing book fair every year, and I was also invited to come and read at their school, and so I'm going to be setting up times for that. So I must have done my name's getting around just from Sun Valley, because now I've been invited by another one. So that might be my new calling. So I can't wait to do that. But if you get an opportunity, please go and support Jerry Whitehead. They have some amazing books in there for sale. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Westlake. Clerk Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. I had a pleasure to visit a couple schools. Trustee Mayberry joined me at Spanish Springs High School. It's supposed to be a 1-hour visit. It ended up being, I think, almost several. But it was good, very informative. We discovered that there's actually a program that our high school students at Spanish Springs, and it's the only one, I don't want to take the thunder from you, but they teach pre-K. So it's actually legitimate that parents drop off their kids, and our high schoolers, obviously supervised by staff, get this education, and they actually get several certificates. I wish I remember them all, but in a sense, like, these students can graduate and have pre-K education certification, so it's pretty cool. Visited some other schools, and I'll try to keep it short. I was invited, so this is kind of an honor. I was invited to be a guest speaker at Galena High School for their GRTC award ceremony, so that's pretty cool. And yeah, it was a good couple weeks. Thanks.
That is incredible. Vice President Nicolette.
I will kind of piggyback on that. That is precisely why I'm fully on board for supporting pre-K in our schools, and I will say more about that during strategic planning. But one of the things I want to say very adamantly and very heartfeltly is that I do not believe education in our schools is broken. I do not believe that at all. I do know there are things that need to be fixed, things that we will slowly address, and we are addressing them. Trying to move education is like moving a big battleship. It is very slow, and it takes a concentrated effort, it takes focus, it takes a plan, and we are getting there. I will tell you that every school I visit, there are fabulous things going on. So to say that our educational programs are broken, it's just simply not true. And here's just a few. Silver Lake, they have what's called Flamazing Fun. They have not only the dolphin, but a flamingo that is their mascot. And they utilize that to build culture in their school, and it's working, it's happening. Nancy Gomes, the principal there, has created a wonderful tip sheet for parents about how to approach conferences and how the parent is the first and forever teacher, and how we cannot do this without the parents, the families, whatever the dynamics are. I had the opportunity to speak about appreciative inquiry to the first leadership pathway group that Principal Victor Shabandi is doing, and it was absolutely marvelous to hear those teachers and all the wonderful things that are happening, and yet they were very, very open about the things that they know that need to be fixed and how we need to work on them together, because you cannot do it in isolation. So again, there are wonderful, wonderful things going on in our schools, and I have to reiterate that our education that's going on in our schools is not broken, but there are things that we need to fix. And the more we recognize the fabulosities, the flamazing things that are going on, the quicker we will get to be able to correct and align those things that we need to work on. So we appreciative inquiry, the words that we use are very important, and saying we're broken doesn't help. Ta-da.
I appreciate you, Vice President Nicolette. Thank you. Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the opportunity. I had a chance to spend some time at Pine Middle School and met with Principal Redding and Dixon. We talked a lot about behavioral issues and the challenges that some of our schools are facing, particularly near some of the urban core areas. The last few weeks, I really spent some time with our partners. Trustee Rodriguez and I had a meeting with the Reno Sparks Indian Colony, met with Chairman Melendez along with the Vice Chair. It was really enlightening for me to learn a little bit more about our Native students and the zones that they're associated with and the challenges that they're having. Also had a chance to tour PBS, which was very enlightening for me. I was really educated, no pun intended, on some of the programs that PBS provides to in our classrooms, and the facilitators that assist our teachers. Really amazing opportunity for me, and I appreciate the President CEO Kurt Mischie and his team for that experience. I'm the representative for this organization on the Debt Service Commission. As you recall, it appointed me to that. The Debt Service Commission is really exciting commission. So we had our first meeting, and that was really more of an introductory meeting, but I think we have some important issues that we're facing or coming down the pike. Just to piggyback on Trustee Westlake's experience at Sun Valley, yeah, that's a special school, and I'm going to play Sonny the Lion soon, so don't tell anybody.
Do you get to dress up?
Yes, it's a suit. You know, you dress up. It's a lion. Yeah. No, it's pretty phenomenal. So, finally, I just want to, if they're listening out there, my twin girls, Aiden and Reagan, students of Spanish Springs, they turn sweet 16 tomorrow. So I want to tell them I love them and happy birthday. So,
Happy birthday.
thank you.
Birthday. Wonderful. All right. I'm also going to keep mine brief. So talking about some of the great things that we do in the school district and how we cannot do this alone, I'd like to bring attention to an event that was hosted by Junior Achievement of Northern Nevada. They organized and held a career fair at AACT that had more than 20 businesses, colleges, local organizations, and other groups that met with students to talk about what their paths forward may look like. And Junior Achievement does a lot of work in our district and within our community, and we're very lucky to have partnerships like that. I also visited Principal Bradley at Innovations High School. And so Innovations is a school in our portfolio that provides a different high school experience. It's referred to as an alternative school, but really it creates a different model of education. It's the only big picture learning model school in Nevada. Students are not called students, they're called scholars. And one of the things that they participate in is internships or externships, depending on the program, on Wednesdays. And this is where they go into our community. They work with businesses, community leaders, nonprofits, and they actually do work in our community to get a feel for what it is that they're interested in. And I thought that was just really, really remarkable. There's one group that a group of students is working with, and it's called Black Wall Street Reno, which is an organization that focuses on some of the things that we talk about consistently by this board, and that is reducing drug use, supporting mental health, and serving our at-risk youth. So there's 4 students at Innovations right now, Aaron, Noah, Jackie, and Alyssa. And last month alone, they made over 5,000 meals for students of the Washoe County School District to take home so that they had food. That is a lot of food. There's other programs that they participate in with these outreach teams, and they host peer group programs. This is really important. These students lead groups that talk about bullying, suicide prevention, avoiding or recovering from drug use. And it's incredibly powerful, the work that's happening with the organizations in our community and the way that our own students are become leaders in that way, because it's that peer impact that makes such a big difference. And so I'm incredibly proud of that. And then finally, I attended the Associated General Contractors AGC Annual SIR Awards. My guest was Rockstar Construction Principal Melinda Baker from O'Brien Middle School. We had a strong showing from the Washoe County Buildings Group, and just so proud to be involved with that. So thank you to our building community. Thank you. All right. Okay, that concludes board reports. And Superintendent Enfield, do you have anything for your superintendent's report?
I think you've all heard enough from me for one evening, so in the interest of everyone's safety, I will forgo my comments.
Thank you. All right, so that closes out item 4. And now we're going to move on to section 5, our closing items. So item 5.01 is public comment. And JJ.
Renee Resentas.
Hi, Ms. Resentas.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Church, and also Superintendent Enfield for speaking to the jargon. That was really painful for a couple of speakers there. So thank you. I appreciate that. I hate to be the one to put some dampness on this meeting, but I have to ask you, what are they doing about the violence in the school towards other students, the teachers, and how much money is allocated to solving the violence problem in the schools? Do we have anything that is working towards that? I know you can't answer, just, and I can tell you that my grandson, who's going to be 14, he's failing math, and nothing has helped. So my family has had to hire someone outside of the school district to tutor him. And I don't know how well it's going to go. He just started, and it was the gentleman that I met at the town hall that Superintendent Enfield had at one of the coffee houses. It was that gentleman that I called. I had gotten his information and was really impressed with him. He was just very good, how he presented himself, and so that's who my family hired. So I can let you know how it goes. So I just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Valerie Fiannaca.
Hi, Ms. Fiannaca.
I have some positive and some you're not going to like. I had a student from Spanish Springs High School attend an event that I put together this weekend, and he dressed as Lincoln. He's a drama student from Spanish Springs High School, dressed as Lincoln, and delivered the Gettysburg Address for us. It was a huge success. He was wonderful. But he had never read that address before. That was shocking to me. On another note, I was at the county commission today, and a speaker was there asking for money for, it was also, opioids are on their agenda today. I'm acutely familiar with that, as many of you know. He mentioned that they needed more funds to provide Narcan to our schools, including our elementary schools. That struck me. That shocked me. Well, I see the problem in middle school, I see it in high school, but our elementary schools, that kind of did me in for a moment there. And the third thing I want to talk about is I'm seriously concerned about the restorative discipline philosophy embraced by the majority of this board. We've seen the blatant failure of this thinking in the past few months and actually the past few years. Some of you believe that if an incident doesn't happen on school grounds, you can wash your hands of any responsibility, although your homepage says, quote, the district prohibits bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, etc. I spoke out against the hiring of Dr. Enfield based on her restorative justice philosophy being one of her top priorities. I held out great hope, however, for her when she brought staff back into the classrooms. I'm becoming more wary by the month. I will share from Education Crusade's newsletter published today. Speaking on condition of anonymity, a law enforcement officer in Washoe County spoke to Education Crusade about the potentially lethal situation that exists every day at the New Hug High School. The officer stated that when WCSD's superintendent and school board redrew attendance boundaries for the New Hug High School that opened last summer, they included a neighborhood containing a gang that has a history of deadly conflicts with one of the established gangs already attending Hug. The officer stated that the law enforcement leaders strongly urged WCSD's superintendent and school board to adjust the new school board boundaries so as to avoid bringing the two gangs together on the same campus and creating a daily life-threatening situation for students and staff. WCSD's leadership refused the law enforcement agency's urging, and the dangerous situation remains. Education Crusade has found no public comment on this issued by WCSD, Superintendent Enfield, or the school board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fianaka.
Sandy Tibbet.
Hi, Ms. Tibbet.
All right, Sandy Tibbet for the record. After reviewing a superintendent Enfield's contract, or employment contract, and board policies 9050, 9051, 9080, I have come to the conclusion that Superintendent Enfield and certain board members are colluding to censure Trustee Church. Board Policy 9050 is based on the standards of the balanced governance model and is supposed to balance the authority of a superintendent to lead a school district only, not the board, with the necessary oversight to locally engaged and knowledgeable board. Trustees Church's ability to provide the necessary informed oversight that is required to ensure the district achieves appropriate and measurable progress is being intentionally constricted by Superintendent Enfield. Functional governance is supposed to ensure that the district reflects transparency and accountability, and the relationships with key constituents are meaningful. There has been no meaningful transparency or accountability for Enfield's actions against Trustee Church, since Enfield will not disclose what actions Trustee Church took to jeopardize the district. I am left to assume Enfield is attempting to cover up her own actions. Board Policy 9051 outlines a board member's conduct, ethics, relationship, and with the superintendent, all based on the balanced governance model standards. President Smith, which one of the 10 policy indicators did Trustee Church fail to follow? Shouldn't that trigger the balanced governance progressive response process? Are you following your own policies and procedures, President Smith? Maybe it is time to entertain a recall, Vice President Nicolette. Trustee Church is entitled to a public hearing to hear why he has been denied access to Washoe County staff. Where is the equal access? Where is the balance? He only needs a second. Board Policy 9080 clearly states the superintendent is required to carry a Nevada Department of Education license. Superintendent Enfield's very, very sweet contract was signed on 5/10/22 with an agreement to obtain her license within a reasonable time. I want to verify, is Superintendent Enfield a licensed administrator for the Nevada Department of Education? Oh, good. Good. I asked for a copy. I'm still waiting for it. So I also wanted to just point out, where is your moment of silence for Chloe Edwards? Should we take this moment for a moment of silence for Chloe Edwards? Because you guys can't recognize or acknowledge her?
Thank you, Ms. Tibbet.
Laney.
Hi, Ms. Laney.
Hi. Okay, I just wrote something. I'm just going to read it. First and foremost, our kids should be the most important. CRT should not be the forefront of education when our kids aren't learning the basics, cursive, reading, and math. When they aren't being held accountable for even their grades. We are making kids soft and discipline is broken. Kids are choosing poor choices and trying to be heard. Suicide, drugs, guns, and knives. There is right and wrong, and no matter whose feelings get hurt, life is tough. We have to prepare them that life is full of difficulties and choices with consequences. It isn't to please everyone, and parents too need to take action. It isn't always the teacher's fault. Parents are just important as to kids learning as teachers. Kids need directions, hope, discipline is huge. With all this CRT and transgender that you think is important, here are 2 papers that I have brought. One is by a clinical transgender from Berkeley who is opposed to young kids, and the other young kids to changing. The other is to a paper telling you the horrible side effects of the hormones to our kids. How did you guys all grow up? Were you able to choose your life? Kids need their choices, not coerced or manipulated. Let our kids dream. They have choices that they can make when they grow up, and it's their life. It's not the schools, and it's not the parents. These drugs are causing hearts and lung issues, and she's a transgender herself that is talking about these kids are too young to make these choices. They don't even know about life. And a lot of them, if you look, they're very upset that they did that, and then they're stuck. Now they're neither or. We've taken their choice away. It's just like the parents that say, hey, you're going to go to Harvard and be a doctor. Maybe that's not their dream. Maybe it's the parents' dream. We need to let the kids choose. Your job for a school is to teach so that when they grow up, they can choose the direction that they want to be. There's copies of both of these. They're very good articles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll make sure that everyone gets a copy of those.
Sayavash. Sayavash.
Hi, welcome.
It's the first time I'm here. Do I need to do anything here? The reason I'm here is just to make a comment regarding the girl that was murdered. What was that?
Microphone, please.
Oh, closer. Okay. I'm here to make comments regarding the 14-year-old girl that got killed due to the lack of action from you guys. Okay, that's what happened. Now, there is another story that I just read before I got here that's about to happen in the Hug High. Two gang members or something, they're going to be in the boundaries to go into Hug High, and the police department has already told you guys about it. Please do something before something else happens. Okay. Now, I'm a grandfather of a boy 4, and my granddaughter is 2. When my son was in school, I was always in the school, every single day. What happened? The doors are locked now? Why? What are you guys hiding? I have a lot of information. I don't read mainstream media. Not all that lies, please. Okay, now in the last 3 years since the pandemic started, I go around and watch everybody brainwashed. You can't tell these people anything. Nothing. Okay, please do your job. You are taking these people's tax money and you're not doing anything. That girl should be at home. This really has affected me. Please. We are destroying this country. This is where we got to make school is where we have to do something. And we're not. And people come and make comments and nothing gets done. I think there's only 2 people in here to do the job. Okay, we have a total corrupt government. And it goes down to everybody else doing the same thing. We have a fake pedophile president. Trump, 3rd top president in the history. No, the election had to be stolen. The COVID started for that reason.
Thank you.
Kaylin Evans.
Hi, Mr. Evans.
Hi, for the record, my name is Kalen Evans. I'm the president of the Washoe Education Association. Trying to follow that up here. we all understand, and all of you understand, the issue with student behavior. All of the individual conversations that I've had with you, my individual conversations with Dr. Enfield, I don't question that this is a top priority. And I was really encouraged, President Smith, with our conversation over the weekend, specifically regarding this issue. I'm really looking forward to the action steps that are going to be coming forth, because I think what a lot of the frustration people feel is that because they may not know the work that's going on behind the scenes, that there isn't necessarily the communication and transparency that we need at times. I don't think it's intentional on anybody's part, but it's just something that we have to be ultra conscious of, because the community and our families and our educators have to know that there is no more of a priority than the safety of our students and our employees, period. And so I'm really excited about the work that I know that you're going to be spearheading, and I sincerely appreciate that. A couple other quick things, and I just had a really encouraging conversation with Dr. Troy Parks about the work on the assessment audit. I know that there was a lot of discussion around that early in the year, and I kind of followed up, and it's moving ahead exactly, really encouragingly for how staff would like to see this, because there might be opportunities too for savings fundings in terms of how we're using those funds currently for assessments. So that's really, also the work that Dr. Enfield has done within the central office in terms of her work on auditing the different areas to make sure that we have the employees that are doing, the work that they need to be doing in those areas. I think that's extremely encouraging. And just real quickly, looking at going legislatively, and we talk about funding, and I think it's important that people understand the real context, right? And you've heard me say about bottom 5%. So we have a governor's proposed budget that would put $2 billion into education, right? Historic funding, and it absolutely is. We've never seen increases like that. But keep in context, even with those proposed fundings, we will still be over 30% behind the national average in Washoe County. That just shows that we are coming from such a place of deficit as a school system that we could put $2 billion into education in Washoe County, still be 30% below the national average. So I just think that it's important. And then finally, before we've had a lot of moment of silence, my time's going to run out, but Ben McDonald was a teacher at O'Brien Middle School and a building rep, and he passed away.
Evans. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Jeff Church.
Welcome, Mr. Church. Are you addressing us as a colleague and trustee, or as a Mr. Jeff Church?
I have not been asked that before, and don't have an answer to it. I really don't. And it cost me 5 seconds. JJ. All right. I am Jeff Church. I want to address a few issues. There is a handout for your reading pleasure. First of all, I want to talk about gangs in schools. And I ask my fellow trustees to second a request that we be provided with any reports or statistics on gangs in our schools, preferably at an open board meeting in a formal briefing. I recently discovered a WCSD webpage that we have an officer assigned to the regional gang unit. I'm now told that we have approximately 95 validated gang members ages 12 to 18. Yes, age 12. Many of them are probably in our schools, along with those that are associates or not yet validated. So basically, I'm asking for an agenda request. I have submitted an updated agenda request of my 22 items for your viewing pleasure. Moving on to data privacy. Previously, Mr. John Eppolito made some accusations against staff on providing inaccurate information. I asked Mr. Eppolito to back that. Essentially, it appears that in 2021, a staff member did give bad information, but there was absolutely no proof that it was intentional. A year later at a board meeting, the issue came up and was corrected. Essentially, the issue was if a nonprofit vendor maintained a second base of WCSD student data. That does raise the issue of should be answered as if our IT department oversees the database for security from that third-party vendor and how long that information is maintained. Because we did, in fact, give bad information at a board meeting, that was corrected a year later that folks may not be aware of, I suggest that in the spirit of transparency, we put out a summary addressing that issue. I thank Mr. Ippolito for his diligence and concerns, and at the same time, I ask him to be much more civil in his discourse in the future. Finally, 56 seconds, I should have 60, Reno High School political event. I want to bring to your attention that prior to the election, a political rally was held at Reno High School, and based on a complaint that I made after first exhausting internal remedies, the report found, in fact, 2 violations of policy, and the term merit was used. Time limit to detailed explanation and debriefing of that report, but I have that application for your viewing pleasure. Because members of the public complained, at that time, and at the time they were led to believe that all the procedures were followed. We now know, in fact, based on that report, they were not. I think we should apologize to those members of the community and issue a public notice of the findings so that the public knows they were not correctly informed. And in the 10 seconds in your handout, you can see this is not really a application, it's a partial application. Thank you.
You can keep going for your additional 5 seconds. I'm not going to take those away from you.
All right. Anyway, look at the red arrows, and you'll see to be determined. To be determined is not a contract. That's a pre-contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trustee Church.
Janet Butcher.
Hi, Ms. Butcher. Welcome. Hi, thank you.
Janet Butcher for the record. I want to speak a little bit just briefly about the term broken. Broken can be maybe not totally broken, could be somewhat broken. Several years ago, my daughter brought home a young man, and she called him, before she brought him home, she said, he's an all-American boy. Wasn't my definition of all-American boy. But I want to piggyback on Valerie's comment about the young man who spoke the other evening and did the Gettysburg Address. Last fall, I asked a couple of the trustees and the superintendent what happened on Constitution Day. And in fact, one trustee said, "What is that? And when is it?" It happens to be September 17th every single year. I don't think that the school does anything about it. So I'd like to present it now. So hopefully you can get it looked at and something happen come September 17th. It is part of our heritage. It is part of our country. It is part of what happens. And that's part of the part that is broken in our schools, is that obviously we are falling very short, that even adults don't know when Constitution Day is. And I would also like to give homage to the sentiment about the young lady that died, that was murdered. It's a shame. And I was here late, so I don't know if you did do a moment of silence for her and her family, but hopefully, I have almost a minute left. Hopefully, we can use it for silence.
Thank you very much, Ms. Butcher.
The board received emails from Bruce Foster, Mon Bertolucci, Brian Ebris, E. Jerskovich, Dana Hart, and Matthew Hertz.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings an end to Section 5 for item 5.01, public comment. And now I will announce that our next meeting is going to be Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. And that brings us to the adjournment of our meeting at 5:15 p.m. Thank you very much.